started? Yeah. Nope. Okay. Good evening and welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday, October 16th, 2018. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, at 7:05, we have a public hearing. I'm going to public hearing on a transfer of an alcohol license. We have invited representative from SUSMA Corporation forward, and can you introduce yourselves?
Hi, my name is Mehul Patel, and I'm going to be buying the SUSMA Corporation.
Okay, you can come and sit up
table.
front, please. So, was tonight's meeting properly posted and have all the abutters been notified, Sandy?
They have.
Great. So this public hearing is for the transfer of all beverage license from Haney Inc. to the SUSMA Corporation, both known as Colonial Liquors. And so notice is hereby given under Chapter 138, Section 15A of the MGL that a public hearing will be held on Tuesday, October 16th at 7:05 p.m. at the Town Hall, 1 Main Street, Upton, Mass. On the application of SUSMA Corporation, DBA Colonial Liquors, 6 Milford Street, Upton, Mass. For an all-alcohol beverages license 15 package store transfer from Haney Inc. DBA Colonial Liquors, 6 Milford Street, Upton, Mass. Owner-manager. The description of the premises is as follows. A first-floor store consisting of 2 areas, one 32 by 11 and 2 19 by 19 facilities, including a restroom, exit to front, and a second exit to the east side of the building. Basement area 20 feet by 30 feet to be used as storage. Entrance to the basement area through the east side of the building. And so tonight we will allow yourself, sir, to speak and let us know what your application is about.
So my application is to transfer the liquor license from Haney Corp to my corporation, SUSMA Corporation. I'll be the owner, sole owner, and I'll be running the business as it is with the employee currently I have. And I'll be working there 30 to 40 hours a week.
And do you have experience in this type of business?
Yes, I do. I have 2 additional liquor stores, one in Shrewsbury, Mass., and one in Paxton Liquor. Paxton.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Paxton Liquor.
Paxton? Okay.
So you're basically buying Colonial Liquors from the present owner and looking to
Yes.
transfer the license?
Yes.
Okay. Have you already purchased the business, or is this part of that process?
Part of the process.
Got it. Okay. So this needs to go through in order for you to
Right.
complete that purchase?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Any problems in the past with holding liquor licenses? Never had any trouble
Never
at all?
had any trouble.
Okay. Don't think I have any other questions.
Any other questions? Any abutters present or anyone from the audience have any questions?
Just asking everybody tonight to speak up louder.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. All right. Anything else? Okay. Have a motion?
Make a motion that we approve the liquor license transfer. And it would be from,
Oh, hold on. I've got it.
can I find it?
From SUSMA to...
From SUSMA Corporation.
Oh, no, sorry. From
Yeah, I
Hanley
think
to
it's from-
SUSMA.
Yeah, Hanley Corporation to SUSMA Corporation, DBA Colonial Liquors.
Second that? And majority action, and with that, we'll close the hearing.
Thank you.
And we're going to go back to the top of the agenda to approve the regular session meeting minutes from October 2nd, as well as from the executive session. Thank you.
Thank you
very much. See ya.
You want to make the motion? I'll second it.
Yep, let me just look at this quick. Okay, I make a motion to approve the October 2nd executive session meeting minutes.
Second the motion?
And I make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from October 2nd.
Second the motion?
Any questions or comments on any of the meeting minutes? All right. So next, item 3.2, we have the Eagle Scout presentation. So I'd like to invite Cole Sullivan forward to present your project.
Hello, good evening. My name is Cole Sullivan, and I am looking to do a cemetery beautification project as my Eagle Scout project and to help beautify the community. The project was suggested to me by the Upton Men's Club. My proposal is to build a stone wall around the Lakeview Cemetery sign, similar to the wall built around the Memorial School sign, but this will be approximately 8 by 7 feet, more oval shaped than rectangular, and it will leave about 5 feet in between the wall and the nearest grave sites. We will dig a 1 foot deep trench and then pour a concrete footing for the wall. I will discuss all of these plans with the cemetery commissioner, Mr. Fowler. After it is built, I will plan to put a variety of perennials around the sign and within the stone wall. And I would like to request approximately $1,500 for the project, and it will be completed in about 4 weeks. Before this project, I had 2 other projects. The first one I started about a year ago, and it fell through when there was a parking lot issue. I was going to build a bus bench at the senior homes in Upton, but that project fell through. And then the second project I took up after that was the project in the senior center, where I was going to revamp the kitchen by putting in shelves and putting in a new countertop, but that also went through because of funding issues. And I greatly appreciate if you guys would allow for me to get these funds. Thank you.
Thanks, Cole.
Very good. Sounds like a very worthy project. I take it that you've spoke with Mr. Fowler and members of the Cemetery Commission?
I have not yet because of the short notice of the project I got like 2 days ago. So I haven't been able to contact Mr. Fowler yet, but it will happen very soon.
We can probably help you with that.
That would be greatly appreciated.
Mr. Fowler's standing here in the back of the room. Mr. Fowler, you're familiar with this sign as you had it installed recently, correct?
Yes.
So for folks that don't know, Lakeview Cemetery is the cemetery right by Pratt Pond and Kiwanis Beach there. The sign was put up recently where the boat ramp is as a marker for Lakeview Cemetery, and this is to put around it a small stone wall and build up the earth around it and put in a little garden, because the sign right now stands up off the ground and it's just 2 posts going into the ground. So this will sort of finish off that area. So go ahead, Glenn.
We were previewed on the project a few days ago through an email and some photographs that he was smart enough to send along to us. The commissioners have all seen them. They have all been delighted with the proposal. And we have not met to vote, but have no concerns that we will have an affirmative action when the time comes. So we're delighted to have the project underway and are totally for it.
Great. Thanks. Does that help?
Yes.
Great. Any other questions?
I have none. Sounds like an excellent project.
Yep, we have a question in the back.
Stone samples. Obviously, the sign itself is a great granite. So do we want to match that, or do you want to contrast it? Does it matter to you?
You're familiar with the signs we have at the entry to town sites?
Yeah, exactly.
Very similar to that would be ideal.
Same style. But
Same style.
Okay. But having a natural fieldstone against, rigid granite that may not match those perfectly, or may look out of balance.
I would think more likely same kind of slab stone that you have at the town signs,
Okay.
and it's a lot easier to work with.
Yes, definitely.
So, Do yourself a favor.
Yeah, certainly.
Now, if you really want fieldstone, I know where to get some.
Great, and that's, I mean, you guys don't have to commit to that here either. You can discuss that, and if there's other options you want to look at, you can do that. And if you need to adjust the budget and come back, you can do that too. So just let us know whatever we can do to help out. It's a great
Definitely.
project.
Yep.
Any other questions from the audience? You good?
I'm good.
All right, want to make a motion?
Sure. I'd like to make a motion for $1,500 from the Town Beautification Fund for the purpose of building a stone wall around the Lakeview Cemetery sign.
I second that, and that's a majority action. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Good luck,
Fowler.
Cole.
Next item on the agenda is recognition. Do we have any recognition? Call out, Sandy? Do you know of?
No, I don't have anything.
Nothing? Okay. So we have agenda item 5.0 is a town manager report.
I'm going to reserve my comments for further on in the agenda.
Okay, sounds good. So next is item 6.1, a street sign request. Dave Chapman has asked the Board of Selectmen to consider placing a three-way stop sign at the corner of Chestnut Street and South Street. The request has been forwarded to the police chief and the DPW director. To install a three-way stop sign at this intersection would require an engineering study. Both the police chief and the DPW director recommend the study. So this study will be performed in accordance with the state stop sign checklist. Stop sign requirements can be found in the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control, if you have spare time. Devices for Streets and Highways, Federal Highway Administration, 2003 edition 23, CFR 655 603 MGLC 85 S2. I don't really have any idea what that is. Suffice it to say they want to put in a three-way stop sign at the corner of Chestnut Street and South Street, and there needs to be a study. Is Mr. Chapman here today? Okay. So I don't know if we need to discuss this or have a motion. I don't see anything that includes how much the study would cost or who would pay for it.
The DPW has a line item for engineering. They always have a line item reserved for these types of occasions where they have to go ahead, bring an engineer on board to do this, to do the traffic study, and then come back with a recommendation as to what signs we need to affix in this intersection.
Mm-hmm. So is it a... Sorry.
If I may, I actually live right around the corner from this intersection.
Yeah.
I live at 161 South, so I drive through this intersection at least twice a day. It is tricky, but I personally don't like the idea of a three-way stop there. There's already a three-way stop at South and Misco, so that would actually put two three-way stop signs probably less than 1/8 of a mile apart. I don't know if there's something else that may work better, maybe a yield, but I'd probably like to get a little time to look at this, and maybe you can take a look at the intersection yourself and kind of see the proximity. I mean, basically, it's a 90-degree turn. You know, it's the continuation of South Street, but if you're heading south on South Street, it is basically a 90-degree turn, so I'm not sure that it really warrants another stop there.
And is this to put a stop sign on Milford Street as well?
No, this would be further down the road off of Milford Street. It would be at South and Chestnut.
Right, well, I know there's South Street and Chestnut
And Chestnut.
further down. I gotcha. Okay, now I'm there. I was thinking of Grove Street.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's already a stop on Chestnut Street. So if you're coming down Chestnut, it's a non-issue.
Yeah.
It's basically, it would only
around that
correct,
turn.
yeah, it would only correct really if someone on going south on South Street is trying to make a left.
Right.
It would kind of, you know, again, I don't know if a yield sign might work a little bit better in that direction, but I don't like the idea of a three-way stop myself.
So this says engineering study, but is that just a traffic study? Do they just
Right,
do a
it's
car
just
count?
right. So the
Strips across the
DPW
road
would
and-
hire an engineering firm to come in to do a study. I mean, there are DOT requirements for traffic studies, and so they would adhere to those requirements, and they'd come back with a recommendation, whether it's a yield sign, a three-way stop, or anything else that they think is the most appropriate for that intersection.
Yeah, I mean, if a citizen's asking for it and both the police chief and DPW director recommend the study, I support the experts, so. And the money's there to do it, so that would be the big thing for me, is the money and support from the DPW director and the chief. So I don't know what to think.
Well, I don't like it, but
Well, this is
I'm
just
not
to do the
saying-
study, so they might come back and say, we're not gonna put a three-way stop sign there.
Right.
And then if whatever their recommendation comes back, who has to approve that or make the final call on whether or not the three-way stop sign goes in?
Signage, I'd have to pursue that. I would assume, this is, to be honest with you, this is unusual that, this is how often does it, they come to the Board of Selectmen to, through this process, to even seek approval to do a study. Most communities don't do that, and the DPW, under his
They just do it.
professional judgment, would just go ahead and do the study and then recommend improvements. So given this process, I would imagine we'd have to come back and recommend some type of signage based upon the analysis by the engineer.
So I would think that unless we know that it would come before the board again, that we should pass over this so that we can understand exactly what the process would be once the study's completed. And then that way there we have a sense of, we're not just sort of setting it free and let the process unfold, that we've got another chance to deliberate it with the chairman here and with the full board here.
yeah, maybe get a chance to talk to the DPW director, see what he thinks.
See what he thinks.
I guess it just, to me, it would seem unusual that you'd have a continuous street that would have two stop signs less than an eighth of a mile apart. It just,
Yeah, and I don't know that there's any issue with I don't know. That's why I would have to defer to the experts. I don't.
Right.
There's accidents there. I drive through there all the time. It's never struck me as particularly dangerous, but
right.
we should figure that out. Okay, so we'll pass over the street sign request for the time being and push it to a future agenda.
Yep. So our next meeting will be November 20th. I think we'll have plenty of time from now till then to get this information back.
Okay, yeah, and we'll just come back with sort of what the process is, and once we know that, we can decide what to do.
Sure.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
Any questions or input on that? Nope. Sorry, Lily. Oh, okay. I guess you can ask that question. Mr. McGuire will help you. Mr. McGuire, would you mind helping Elizabeth find the ladies' room? Or, yeah, that's probably a better idea. Leave it to Dad. Thanks. Thank you. All right.
I want to check that request.
Do I need to bang the gavel for that? Or, 6.2 is permission to put up a small portable soccer goal on town land. So is Mr. Nickel here? Hi, Mr. Nickel. Come on up, introduce yourself. Mr. Nickel is seeking permission to put up a small portable soccer goal on the field behind the fire and police station. So why don't you go ahead and tell us what you're thinking?
Okay, well, I'm Bob Nickel, and I live right near there. We live on 1 Nelson Street, and my son is obsessed with soccer. And we have several friends on the street, on Warren Street, and they've actually gotten together on that field a few times and just kicked the ball around. And our backyard is a little small. We have a soccer goal in there now, but it's a little small, and it's also officially a condo. And so there's issues whether he can play there in our backyard all the time, because it's... So we thought, we should see about getting a little goal for that field. And they were playing there one time, I think it was in the spring or the summer, and several of the police officers came out and were playing with them. So it seemed like a nice thing, and it's not just for us. We would put the goal there, and anyone could use it. We're not asking for money. We would be happy to. It's not expensive. We're not looking for a big metal, full-size goal. We have one in our backyard, it's much smaller, and it's light. It can be moved. It can be easy to maintain, and that's basically it. So. They were going to come. They were going to come today, but my son just had a soccer game and he couldn't make it. So
It seems like a very reasonable request. I think the only question I guess I'd have is if you
Yeah.
put this goal out there, would you then be bringing it back to your house every time
No.
in between use?
no, we would leave it there for so anyone could come and use it, and it would just be there. It's pretty small, so I mean, not a lot goes on there other than people walking their dog or, so I don't think it would be any kind of obstruction. So no, we were thinking of just putting it there, and my son and his friends could come there, and anyone in the neighborhood. The police officers can come and kick the ball around if they want.
And this would be behind the fire station
Yeah.
to the, not between the fire station and School Street, but behind the fire station to Warren Street, that section of the field?
Yeah, there's a little field that's behind the police station, by the police station parking lot, and right behind the fire station parking lot. It's a nice little, I didn't even know it was a, I a couple of times walked my dog over there, and I didn't know if I was allowed to do that, but I've noticed that a lot of people do that, and such a nice little park there.
Yeah.
So,
I only ask because as you come down School Street, I know there's a monument that I believe the fire station has a monument right in front of it.
Oh, yeah, no, it's in the
Make sure
back.
it wasn't near that.
yeah,
as
and
long
it's
as-
not
Can you come show us
on
where
the
the
road.
field is?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can come up.
I actually, yeah. I have
I think
my
I know what it
phone.
is.
Let me
Right
just
where
get
the
my
parking
phone.
lot is. So,
Like here?
I think this one here is probably the fire station. I think
Right,
we
this is the
stand over.
fire department
So
here.
that would be the field.
This field here?
Yeah, see, I was concerned it was this field, but I
Okay.
think it's that field.
So this is the fire department, police department, Church Street, Warren Street.
Again, my only concern was that the monument was there and School Street is there. It's
Let me
kind of a
just,
busy
I
street.
took an actual picture of where I wanted to put it, so maybe this will help. I don't know if this helps. You know that little shed where they keep stuff by
It
the,
fanned up, we gotta just scroll back.
Oh, so that's this shed here, right?
yeah, they keep like all the Halloween
Oh, okay.
stuff in this little shed, which is right by the fire station is right, let me see this.
That
for a
would be
second.
over here.
Yeah, the fire station would be on the other side of this.
Yeah.
Like, if you kept going this way.
Right,
you'd
so it's
end
not
up
a
on
big, it's not a
Church
big
Street.
field, it's sort of a small grassy area
Yeah.
to put on, okay. Yeah, I think it's a great idea to use green space for public activities like that. Are there any issues, Derek, from an insurance perspective, a liability perspective? Is it town land, is it fire, is it
It
associated
is
with
town
fire?
land. We've checked with the fire chief, police chief, and the DPW. DPW maintains that space already.
Yeah,
As much as they can. Fire and police, they don't have an issue with it. Certainly, again, it would be covered under our insurance. Folks use our public parks on a regular basis, which all falls under our insurance. So liability would be less of risk than using any other park in town.
okay. I'm good. Any other questions?
I have none. I think we got it figured out.
All right.
Does anybody have questions on this one, or feedback or input before we vote? Okay.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve the request to set up a portable soccer goal on the town land behind the fire and police station.
Second the motion.
Majority action.
You're all set?
All right, thank you so much.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully-
Appreciate it. Have fun. Item 6.3 on the agenda, electronic voting. The Selectmen will continue to explore options regarding electronic voting and creating an implementation committee. So do we want to discuss this during the warrant article review, or do you want to do it now?
Mr. Loper is here.
Yeah,
so-
okay,
Yeah,
why don't we do it now so that you can depart if you want to. Come on up, Mr. Loper, Mr. Moderator, thank you.
So, for those who don't know, my name is Dave Laper. I live at 18 Nelson Street. I'm the town moderator. So, there has been some communication back and forth between myself, Mr. Brindisi, and the board with regard to the way Article 20 is worded. So, let me just give some historical background to the folks who maybe don't know where this all started. In the summertime, the board had asked me to come talk to them about what I knew about electronic voting at other towns, because being the moderator, I would be one who would be aware of a number of towns that have moved to electronic voting. So I talked a little bit about some of the things I've heard that are really positive, some of the things that might be of concern. But for the most part, the moderators in the towns who have done this have been happy with electronic voting, okay? So then after that, there was a movement to possibly use electronic equipment at the special town meeting in November, at which point I said, whoa, hang on a second. We need to ask the community, do they want to use electronic voting? So I spoke with the board again at the last meeting, and one of the statements I made near the end was, and I should have made this clearer and more succinct, that nearly every community I'm aware of, and there might be a couple that weren't, has formed a subcommittee first to look into all the positives, negatives, costs, little things that have to be done with regard to electronic voting. Then they make a recommendation to the town at a town meeting, and then the town meeting votes to say, yes, let's move forward, or no, let's not. My concern with Article 20 is that you're asking the community to move forward with electronic voting without putting together a subcommittee. And that, to me, is not the appropriate way to do it. We're fortunate in that a number of towns already have electronic voting, so there's some history now that we have. Still, though, for the townspeople of Upton, this is a brand-new thing. And my concern is if we ask the town at November to move with electronic voting, one of two things will happen. The town will vote yes, possibly, and not really be sure about all the different things that a subcommittee could find out ahead of time, and that we might move ahead with it, and it wouldn't be a smooth transition, and they might find out that, you know what, we really don't want to do this, but we've already voted to do it. The flip side, though, could be if the town votes against it, you'll then have taken a few steps backwards, because then you'll say to yourselves, well, you know what, we should have put a subcommittee together in the first place and done it the right way. Okay? So my feeling is either way it would happen, if Article 20 stands the way it is, and if we have a motion derived from Article 20, the townspeople would be doing something that would not be in their best interest. So, and I've emailed this to the board and to the town manager. It is my strong recommendation that we change Article 20 to have it be, to see if the town will vote to put together a subcommittee to investigate the possibility of using electronic voting. And many other towns have done this way, so there's already language that exists to do that. By doing that, and you could get a 5 to 7 member committee, and you want to have people, clearly people who have a certain amount of electronic background, people who maybe just have a very neutral perspective, because I actually want people with a real neutral point of view to investigate this. And then to then be able to answer the questions that people are going to have. Okay, I'm afraid that in November, people are going to have questions, and there might be answers, but the answers are going to be not necessarily the most thorough that they could be unless we had a subcommittee to put those things together. So, that's my recommendation, okay? Clearly, it's the board's prerogative to put on whatever article they want, but I'll state here tonight as clearly as I can. If Article 20 is stated as it is, and if the motion we have from Article 20 is as it is, then I will comment on that at the town meeting, okay? Clearly, I'll have to step aside to do that, and someone else will have to moderate. But I am concerned with moving ahead with this without putting together a subcommittee. I've got a whole list of towns here, and every one of them has voted in favor of electronic voting. Every one of them put together a subcommittee. Now, there might be a couple who didn't do that, but all the ones that I've seen and the moderators I've talked to over the years say that's the way to do it. So that's my recommendation, gentlemen. Okay, so.
I think it's really a little bit of semantics. I really think that there's two things here. We can put a subcommittee together really at any point in time. We don't need to have a vote or a warrant article to put before the voters to ask to put together a subcommittee. You know, we do that all the time. Joint feasibility committees, study committees, economic development committee. We put together committees quite often. So there's nothing really out of the ordinary. And I think the component that you may be missing is we're hearing a lot from the residents. We get a lot of comment from the residents. So you're kind of asking to this is the residents' opinion. You know, we're asking their opinion. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to run right out and spend the $5,000 immediately. At that point in time, once we know that it's popular, in fact, I think I sent you an email really with the same perspective. Once we know that it's popular and that people want to move in that direction, then we can certainly put together a subcommittee and let them, the whole process, let them do the homework, find out what issues there have been in the past. Do people really like it? Does it increase participation and the actual implementation of the actual equipment? So I think that can all happen, and I don't see any issue with putting this before the voters. Again, if the voters are upset with it, and they don't like it, we could pass over the article, or they will vote no on it. But I think it's going to be warmly received myself. I'm not sure if you have an opinion.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. I mean, I've heard from many folks that they want electronic voting. I think that sometimes local government can overcomplicate things just the way state and federal government can, and we always create these committees and subcommittees. However, in this case, how long have you been town moderator?
Over 25 years.
Over 25 years. So I've lived here for 4.5 years. And I know you have a much better pulse on the voters, you have a much better pulse on the electorate and the process. You certainly have a better pulse on the town and the community with regards to how these town meetings go. As a selectman, as a person who's new in town, I always try to defer to the experts and take their opinion to heed, because I think that that's how we're all going to collaborate and work together to make sure that we do the right thing for the community. I do think that if we voted, so there's a couple of possibilities here, right? I think the key thing is that we don't need to rush headlong into this. I'm certainly a supporter of electronic voting because that's what I'm hearing from the people that support me. At the same time, I think, to your point, once we go with electronic voting, it's here to stay. It would be very unlikely that people would go from having electronic voting to not having it. So this is a significant transition for the town, and I think that we don't necessarily need to rush into it, even though I probably would do that if it was left up to me, but there's other people in town and people like yourself that have expertise that's certainly beyond my level of expertise. The question I have is, the motion as it is to ask for, I think it's $5,000.
That's correct.
To utilize, so what could we keep this article, get the approval, but make a commitment to you as the town moderator that we wouldn't implement this, we wouldn't implement electronic voting at a town meeting until the subcommittee met, did their research, got the answers to their question, you participated in that process, you felt comfortable that folks had their questions answered, and then we would make a decision together.
We meaning who? The committee or the town would then vote on it?
Either one. I would say either you and the committee and us can have a conversation. If we don't think it needs to go to the whole town meeting, if we think it needs to go to the town meeting, then we'll have to have another vote in the spring town meeting. I don't know any other way to do it. Is that something that we go ahead? And I know there's questions in the audience, so we'll get to those. Don't worry.
Yeah. So the way the article is written is just requesting an appropriation to purchase hardware and software for electronic voting. I think what you're suggesting, Selectman Simus, is that we go ahead and seek authorization for an appropriation at town meeting, which in theory is an affirmative vote would suggest that town meeting is interested in pursuing this, and then to work alongside the moderator around all those questions, those concerns, those challenges, those barriers that may arise from this type of process. And so having the appropriation and then working in a parallel track with a committee will at least give the committee funds to go ahead and acquire hardware and software if they deem it appropriate. Now,
Yeah.
like any other committee, the committee always comes back to report back to the appointing body, in this case, the Board of Selectmen, which I'm sure there'd be many conversations, them reporting back on a regular basis as to their findings.
Okay.
So if I could just comment on two things. First of all, I'm sure you've heard from people who want electronic voting. Not a single person has said to me, I want electronic voting.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's because I'm not the one talking about it. But I need to be clear with all of you here and the folks here and the folks at home. I'm not opposed to electronic voting, not at all. But I'm opposed to the way in which we're doing it.
Yep.
And given what I've heard, while it sounds nice, it sounds like you're trying to split the difference here and go down the middle. You're really not. Once you decide to buy these things, the town's going to have electronic voting. Let's be honest about it. That's going to happen. So what I'm saying is, put the subcommittee together, have them investigate it, and then make a recommendation, probably at the annual meeting in May, either, yes, we should do electronic voting, and here's why, and this is how much money it's going to cost. And by the way, $5,000 is not enough to do it. Let's be honest, not for a whole year at least, because you have to have other support, not just the equipment. And the other thing that we're assuming, and this is what a subcommittee would do, we're assuming with this article that we want to purchase these equipments. Many towns don't purchase, but they rent, okay, year to year. And for them, it's more reasonable to do that because then they can project how many pieces of equipment they need depending upon the type of meeting that they're having. That's the kind of question a subcommittee can look into and answer. So to be honest with you, to use an old expression, we're putting the cart before the horse here. We really are. So I guess what I'm trying to say is this, as clearly as I can. There's no reason to authorize any money for a subcommittee to go and do their job. What they'll have to do is, and I just did it like a little bit myself, there's lots of towns that have voted for this. They have websites, they have subcommittees that will put together. There's people with names, they can make phone calls. That's what a subcommittee does, okay? Wayland, for example, has an excellent subcommittee. Lots of information, maybe too much information, but at least if you look at their website and you look at what they've done, it gives you some perspective that this is a much more complicated thing than simply buying a bunch of clickers and voting yes or no. It really is a lot more complicated than that. So I respect what everyone has said here. Still, though, I don't think it's a question of semantics. Once you decide to spend money and buy equipment, then you've made the commitment to do electronic voting. I think that's too much to ask at this town meeting. I think at this town meeting you should ask the town, should the town put together a subcommittee to investigate and then make a recommendation about electronic voting at a future town meeting, which would obviously be the annual one, because it doesn't take that long.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, from my perspective, I don't feel strongly about splitting hairs, right? Because we're talking about if the town wants electronic voting, we're either, if they do want it, we're either going to have it in the spring or we're going to have it in the fall, right? If we have a committee and we finish up the committee before the spring town meeting, we put something on the vote for the town meeting warrant in the spring, and then we're having electronic voting in the fall. So we're talking about a matter of 6 months. So I respect your direction.
And there are two things there, just so that you know. Some research was done by the town manager, and we did get the price difference between purchasing the equipment and renting the equipment, and it was really much to our benefit to own the equipment. I mean, the research that Derek did. So that part of it, I know it sounds, you may think that we're just kind of jumping in feet first, but there has been some research that's been done at our level. That's the first thing I just wanted to clarify, that we have looked into the difference between owning and renting. Okay. That's the first part of the equation. And the second part really is, again, this is getting the pulse of the people. If the people want it, they'll vote yes on the article. If the people don't want it, they'll vote no on the article. So you're kind of presupposing that they're going to automatically vote yes. And I'm not so sure that's true.
Right.
Again, maybe you have a better pulse on the community than we do. That may in fact be true. But again, the warrant article, that's the question you put to the people. It's all one question. And we're not going to run right out and buy the equipment. That was the other thing. Just because we have been given authorization to do so, that committee can still exist and still do its work. Maybe we don't buy the equipment till, June of next year. We don't know.
Still, though, my concern is that...
Again, that's assuming that it passes.
Right. And what I don't want to see happen is to have the town vote no simply because they don't have enough questions answered. That's what a subcommittee does.
Yeah.
So that, okay, this is what I'm saying. If there's a vote in November, yes or no for this, that'll be what it is. If you put a subcommittee together, the vote that's going to happen at the annual town meeting will be a much more informed vote. They'll be able to vote yes or no with much more confidence in May of 2019 than in November of 2018. That's my concern with moving ahead with it so quickly.
How will the subcommittee get the information and get their findings out to the public so that the town meeting participants are more informed?
Well, it's their job to do that. So the subcommittee gets put together, probably by the board. I have no problem with that. Again, as long as you have a balanced type number of people.
Yeah.
It would get the info from the various towns who've done it, and even the towns maybe who looked into it and chose not to do it. There's a few towns that have chosen not to do it.
Mhm.
Okay, they get that information together, and then at some point, either before the town meeting to the board, they can come to the board here and say, this is what we've looked into, these are the questions that we've asked and have had answered, this is our recommendation. So that would all happen through the normal process. Right now, we don't have that subcommittee, okay? So therefore, we don't have enough people asking the right questions and getting the answers.
We don't have enough people that are aware of the answers. We have the answers, but you're saying the community should have more of the answers.
I believe so, but as many answers as you folks might have, I still think there's more questions maybe that haven't been asked yet.
Okay.
I don't know the answer. I can't speak to that.
Sure.
But I don't want to make this sound like I'm being.
I think we understand. I'm
I just wanted
I'm with you.
because I want people on there. Okay, clearly there's a push by this board to do this. I have no problem with that. I want people on the committee that aren't all like, let's push for it. I want people on the committee who would say, you know what, let's think about this a little bit. Because let me just give you one example of something that maybe hasn't been thought about. Supposedly it's a time-saving device. Not necessarily. Let me explain why. In towns that have a lot of contentious voting, a lot of standing votes, a lot of secret ballots, yes, it's a time saver, no question about it. For towns that have a lot of just simple, straightforward, unanimous votes, it's not a time saver because you're having everybody vote and you're going to wait for 30 seconds on something which would have probably been a unanimous vote. So in that respect, it doesn't save time, which then drives the question, does the community, as it fits with the way the meetings get run, do they need to have electronic voting? And I think that's the one thing that maybe hasn't been asked. It's not simply the fact that these devices exist, therefore we should use them, and they are cheaper now than they used to be, no question about it. 5 years ago, it was costing towns $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. Now it doesn't cost that much. That's good. But the towns that initially drove this for their communities, it's because they had a lot of contentious voting. And therefore, that really drove the town to do it, okay? Because it was taking so long to have standing votes or so long to have secret ballots. And this eliminates that. And that's a positive reason to do it. But, to be honest with you, we tend to not have those types of votes. Now, that's not a reason why we shouldn't do it, but that's a factor that needs to be put into the equation. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Simply because we don't have a lot of secret ballots, that's a reason maybe for some people to say, well, why do we need to have electronic voting? Because we will be wasting time with me standing there waiting 30 seconds when it's a unanimous vote. Do you understand my point?
I personally, I agree with you. I don't think it will speed the meeting up. And that's not, I don't think that's the end result that we're looking for.
Right.
I'm not looking for the speed.
Sure.
It's really again, we're looking for participation. That's what I'm looking for anyways.
That's fine.
So I'm looking at it as absolutely, I think that the meetings move along pretty quickly. I've told you before in our previous meeting, I think you do an excellent job of calling the vote. However, there is always that question of people that are uncomfortable voting one way or the other on a particular topic because of, the old adage, they're in business or their neighbor or, whatever the case may be. So I'm not looking at it as a time. Again, I think it may in fact take longer to get through the meeting, but I'm looking at it from a standpoint of I think we'll get greater participation.
And one thing, the subcommittee can actually look into that. They can look at all the towns that have voted to do this and say, okay, what has happened with your participation since you put in electronic voting? Has it gone up, down, or stayed the same? And that's not a hard thing to do, but if there's 20 towns that have done it, there's a group of people that have to kind of go through that process, okay, and check with all the towns and say, okay, what happened for the 4 years prior to and for all the time since, what's happened with your participation? That's what a subcommittee could easily do and get an answer to.
Hmm?
Okay? So,
I do see some hands in the audience. Do you want to
Yeah,
take a
go
few
ahead.
questions and
Sure.
comments at this point?
Go ahead.
Me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm Meredith Rice, Sagamore Lane in Upton. When I go in to vote, and I vote all the time, I go in, I say hi to the policeman, I check in at the first desk, I go and get my ballot, go over, fill it out, go to the next desk, go and put the ballot in the slot, and that's it. That's how much time it takes. For electronic voting, if I were to go in this time and find it's all electronic, what do you do?
If
Do you
I,
have to go to the polling place?
This doesn't have anything to do with the polling or the statewide elections.
Did I say, well, I meant voting the polls, voting.
This isn't voting at the polls. This is just at the town meeting that the town has. where we
Voting
go-
at the town meeting
Voting at the town
electronically.
meeting, electronically,
Right.
at the town
I thought
meeting.
you meant
So instead of the yays
voting
and
at-
nays, you have a
But
clicker.
at the high school.
No,
whatever.
not anything to do with
Okay.
that. No.
Then having said that, voting at the town meeting, is it at Nipmuc High School and we're all in the audience?
yes, that would be
Same.
the meeting, those two
Okay,
meetings
and
per
How
year.
do you vote electronically? Does each seat have a computer to press in your vote?
When you check in, as you do now, when you
Yeah.
get to, it's normally held at the auditorium at Nipmuc Regional. So
Yeah.
when you go in, you give your name and address. They check you in. They will assign you an electronic keypad that will have a couple of buttons on it.
Okay,
So one button will be assigned to a yes vote, one button would be assigned to a no vote.
okay, that's all the complication there is of being complicated.
Well, I'm sure there's more to it.
Okay.
As
Now,
Mr. Moderator has told us, there will be more to it.
yeah,
But in simple terms,
Yeah.
yes. And we have been told that whichever button, if you change your mind or you accidentally hit the wrong button,
okay,
you could correct it. So whichever button you hit last. If you
okay,
accidentally said yes and you meant to say no, you could hit the no button and it would cancel out your yes vote.
I see.
But it
Okay.
would be strictly-
Having said that, I
yeah.
just want to spend a half a minute, if, or less, saying, because I was confused and thought it was voting at the polls,
Sure.
I never want us to go to electronic voting on that. First of all, when he said he's getting a lot of people asking for electronic voting, I thought you meant at the polls, and I was going to ask you, what's the benefit? They still have to go to the high school, they have to show themselves, they have to check in, and voting on a computer is confusing, I would think, at least it would be to me. Having said that, taxes that we pay are so, right now, off the wall. And if it's going to cost anything to give the town meeting this, but you think it'll bring people to the town meeting because they're going to be able to press a button, that's not what's holding townspeople back. It's that there are no signs out there reminding them it's voting day, folks, okay, or it's town meeting, folks. That's number one. Number two, they're working, they get home, they don't want to skip supper and go to a town meeting. And unless there's something on there, like for me when it was go on a speech thing, then you bet your life I'm going to be there. But we've been to them recently, there's been hardly anybody there. I don't think they're going to start showing up because they have a thing in their hand to press. I think they're going to start showing up when we bring it home to them, that it's their town and they need to be interested in paying attention to it. I don't know how you do that.
Thank you
But
very
I
much.
just, yeah.
Thank
We
you.
don't need to spend the money.
Thank you.
In fact,
Any,
the next article asks for money to upgrade or access whatever it is there.
we'll get to each one of them in, we'll get to each one of them in order. So is
The
it,
system
Yeah.
is going to take repairing and
Yeah.
staying on top of it.
Yeah.
Where this doesn't take anything.
thank you. Anything else from the audience? Go ahead, Mr. Flaherty.
David, you have that paper I gave you?
Oh, yeah.
You know, they say don't ask a question you don't know the answer to. You've talked about this a couple of meetings I've been to. How many of these devices are we talking about? I believe it's 170, 175. Am I right in hearing that?
We would
Yes.
take that list you're looking at with the number of voters at the past 20 years of town meetings and use that as a piece of information for us to determine how many voting
Yeah.
machines to buy.
Exactly. You've gone from, the average is 168. And I thank my good friend, Madam Town Clerk, who pulled all those data together this afternoon. The average from the past 10 years of annuals and special town meetings is 168 people. There's two aberrations, one in 500 and something when the Sweet William Farm vote, and another one 440 when we talked about buying the sand pit down on South Street. There's some in here for 40 and 50. The number's 165 and 170. I don't know what you think you're going to gain by this, all right? Now, for this is a board who I've heard you talk about transparency. And to me, using these clickers, you're hiding behind the clicker. You're afraid to stand up and make your feelings known. That's what I see. We've been through town meeting for years and years and years. The majority, the greatest majority, and I believe Mr. Martin will back me up on this, these are unanimous votes. In the past 5 years, Mr. Moderator might ask, have we had 5 paper ballots?
Oh.
If that? No. This voting doesn't take a long time.
We typically go to a standing vote before the paper vote, is typically how we do it.
Well, no, that's not how it works, okay?
Can I, just let me finish.
That's
all
right.
right?
Let me explain that in a second.
I just look at this as a waste of time right now and a waste of money. If you're going to do it, listen to the moderator. Get your ducks lined up before you do this. Because you're going to buy 5,000, or you're going to spend $5,000? Or what happens when the technology changes in 2 years? What happens when, like, something happened in Grafton, I've heard the other night, when they had to stop the town meeting because the clickers didn't work, and they had to go back and do it the old way. Okay? I think you're jumping into something that you're going down a road you really don't need to, gentlemen. Listen to the moderator.
Most everybody, let's just get one thing clear, everybody carries a cell phone nowadays. And we're going to if we're going to sit there and worry about how good a clicker is going to last, when all of us are carrying cell phones where we can access the web, emails, and make phone calls all over the world, I'm not going to worry about the technology of a clicker. That's number one. Number two, we're getting declining population, as you and I both know. We sat together at many a town meeting, and you're getting declining attendance at the meetings. So if you don't agree with it, that's fine. Get up at town meeting. Believe me, you can blast the article if you want to blast the article. I don't have a problem with that. The question is putting the article forward or not putting the article forward. I can see you gentlemen aren't in favor of it. Again, I know it's not going to be any faster. I'm well aware of that.
I just make
Frankly,
Yeah,
we're beating the topic to death, but fire away.
Anyone else in the audience have any other comments?
Yeah, I'll just make the statement and the comment that's out there. It's every person's inalienable right in the United States to vote by secret ballot if they wish to do so. You can't force anyone to have to go to a town meeting and stand up one way or the other. You have unanimous votes because some people may be feeling uncomfortable in saying a no vote. Okay, so I'm not stating to the statement of what you guys are saying for or against it. I'm just counteracting that statement. It's not anyone's responsibility to come to town meeting to make their opinion known. If they want to do it in the privacy of their own home or privacy without your neighbor knowing how you're voting, then that's their right to do so.
Thank you very much.
You have a technology committee now, and we'd be happy to help if you'd like that.
Thank you. Okay. go ahead.
Each town that has done this has had someone from a technology committee on the subcommittee, okay? And to your point about the technology, I believe there's a few towns that are actually using the cell phone technology to do the voting. So, having said that, you might think, oh, that means he wants to do it. No, what I'm saying is that the subcommittee is going to look into that kind of stuff so that those types of questions can then be answered. So there's a lot more to it than just simply getting the clickers and voting. And the other thing, which was alluded to, but maybe we need to think about, if we're thinking about like the average number, the problem is it's when you have the big crowds on the controversial issues. Those are the times when you're going to probably have a standing vote or a secret ballot. That's when you want to have the electronic voting. So you're going to need to have not 200, but you'll need 500 or 600. So that's one thing that you have to keep in the back of your mind with regard to the cost. And again, that's a subcommittee type question that they can look into in terms of, it's not just the average, it's many more than that. So
Yeah, one of the
Any other-
questions that a subcommittee, I think, would have to address is when you have a hot button topic and you expect 500 or 600 people in attendance, and you only own 150 or 180
need more.
devices, how do you rent, borrow, or whatnot, the additional devices?
So again, those are, there's a lot of questions, those are just a few of them. So
Anything else you want to add?
I'm all set.
Anyone else in the audience? Any other questions?
I'm up.
Okay. Okay. So this is on the warrant. So when do we have to decide whether or not this shows up on the warrant? Are we going through those later?
We'll review every article. Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I'm all set then,
Thank you,
gentlemen?
sir.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, welcome.
Nice to see you.
Do I have to transfer ownership to him formally somehow?
I gotta apologize to everybody. I got caught at work. I wasn't able to get out, so I'm sorry.
So we're on motion.
Let you run it.
Okay.
Now, where you guys at?
So we're on 6-4. To set the date for tax classification hearing.
I guess I would ask the question, do you have,
November 20th would be set the,
would that be the date? Okay.
Derek, have a date to recommend?
November 20th?
November 20th.
What are we doing? Can someone explain that
we're going to set the tax rate.
right now?
No, on November 20th.
We're setting the date for the tax rate clarification hearing. I don't think anybody knows.
For classification.
Classification.
Is that the night of our normal selectmen's meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Kelly will be here and everybody, the Board of Assessors. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Shall I make a motion for that? Everybody all set? Make a motion to hold a tax classification hearing on November 20th, 2018.
Second?
That's unanimous action. Let's see. Our next agenda item is to execute the state election ballot. The town is required to post a warrant for upcoming elections, which includes state races and ballot questions. I believe that information can be found on the website. So, any questions on that?
No, I have none.
Make a motion to execute the state election ballot.
Second motion?
That's unanimous action. The next is we have a couple new policies in preparation for our special town meeting. The first one is to motion a drug and alcohol-free workplace policy. This policy outlines and prohibits conduct with respect to controlled substance, marijuana, and alcohol. This policy complies with the towns of Upton's obligations under the Federal Drug Free Workplace Act. Would you like to elaborate, Mr. Town Manager?
Yeah, so I guess I'm just going to say a few words, because the chairman of the Personnel Board is here tonight, Nate Fisher, and he's here prepared to speak to the three policies that are in front of you this evening, and most importantly, the Personnel Policy and Procedures Manual, which is slated for a special town meeting. I'd like to acknowledge all the hard work of the Personnel Board they have spent, and Sandy as well, who works very closely with the Personnel Board, to really take a hard look at all of our policies, procedures, how we administer the personnel bylaw, and then update those. And the next three policies really reflect the newest regulations and requirements that we must adhere to. So again, as the chairman pointed out, this is in preparation for the new policy and procedures manual. But I'll turn over any questions, detailed questions to Nate Fisher.
Hi. Good evening.
Yeah,
There you go. So Nate Fisher, formerly 1 Driscoll Lane in Upton, Mass. So the three policies that you guys have before you currently are, policies that we're recommending. Obviously, I'll go further because it's a further item down there in regards to how we're going to handle the policy and procedure manuals, or what we're suggesting via the town warrant. But the first of which, obviously, you have the drug and alcohol free workplace policy, just a guideline in regards to federal law and other things that are out there in regards to what's prohibited off duty and on duty, to make sure you're not infringing on any people's personal rights, in addition to making sure that you're not causing any issues for anybody while they're there. Also goes into the federal funds that we'll be able to get, and having a drug-free workplace policy, as well as an employee assistance program, which we already have in place for most of the town employees anyway. So pretty much there. And then sanctions in regards to people's job performance and other things if they fail to adhere to said policy. So any questions? Or?
The only question I have, did this go through KP Law, or?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. That was my question.
Okay.
Is this modeled after the federal regulations? Is that where these came from? Because you've mentioned federal grant money if we put
Yes.
these types of laws in place.
Yeah, basically it's based similarly to the Workplace Act, that's mentioned at the top in the purpose section.
Yeah, great.
Any questions on this?
Nope.
Who wants to make a-
Make a motion that we approve the drug and alcohol-free workplace policy.
I second that.
Unanimous action. Let's see, the next one we have is a policy for equal employment. This policy is for the town of Upton to provide equal employment opportunities and administer working conditions without regard to race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, disability, marital status, veteran status, sexual orientation, and genetic information, or any other protected characteristic under law.
Excellent. Yes. So again, another one of the policies and procedures, just a federal policy in regards to equal opportunity and affirmative action. Just one of the things that we had paperwork-wise to send to you guys that we need to make sure that are covered separately from our documentation that's out there. Also defines the affirmative action officer as Mr. Brindisi is the town manager in regards to keeping control and any of the information that's necessary to turn over to the federal government. So, any questions?
Make a motion to approve the equal employment policy.
Second motion.
Unanimous action. And this last policy is to outline the requirements for criminal history screening for prospective and current employees, subcontractors, volunteers, interns, and professional license applicants. This is basically an update to the town's Corey policy.
Yep. And the Corey policy basically is in place. One of the things that the Personnel Board has mentioned and they're out there, and it's typically not thought of when you're dealing with any people's personal workplaces that are out there. The Corey policy, or the Criminal Offender Record Information Act, is an act that was put in from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It sets the law, many of the things based on the ban the box measure in regards to the measures that are out there, preventing us from not hiring an individual based upon something that happened 20 years ago. So basically it just follows through on the Commonwealth's policy and other information. One of the things that we've failed to do as a town, as many other employment opportunities have, is that the Corey policy does allow for us to rescreen individuals on a yearly basis. So we feel that it's important in regards to some of the positions that we have recreation, the library, and other things that are out there, just to make sure that we're rescreening applicants on a yearly basis, and they're here to make sure, you know, they haven't surprised us and become an axe murderer somewhere, you know, something of that nature. So it just becomes important, you know, and we wanted to make sure that we included that into the current Corey policy that you guys have into place.
So would you say that's the major revision, is that particular?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
The remainder of the policy is pretty much set in stone, and it's basically the same concept of what's already in the Commonwealth law out there, so.
Okay. No other questions?
Nope.
Make a motion that we approve the updated Corey policy?
Second that motion?
That's unanimous action. And the last one we have is to update the entire personnel policy and procedure manual. I personally didn't get a chance to read it all. There's a lot to it.
Yes.
You guys read it all?
No.
We've been reading it very thoroughly for the last 6 months. So much thanks, of course, to Derek. So I'm just going to take a couple minutes just to explain to you guys what we've been doing. So obviously, I wanted to first extend my thanks to you guys and the invitation. I wanted to kind of go through the personnel and policy manual and the need for a new personnel bylaw. So as you guys are no doubt aware, the original personnel bylaw was adopted and created at the annual town meeting in 1996, over 20 years ago. It was also created prior to the Town Manager Act in 2008, and was created in mind with the fact that there was no real HR manager for the town. So at the time, you know, obviously you had the Board of Selectmen, but the Board of Selectmen were elected officials, and we basically needed to have a personnel bylaw as a set of laws that were in effect so that the Personnel Committee could actually handle a lot of the HR responsibilities with the designee that you guys as the Board of Selectmen had appointed in lieu of a town manager to handle. Around the time that the current Personnel Board was instated in July of last year, efforts were underway already with the TMA, or the Town Managers Act Review Committee, to look at the differences between the Town Manager Act and the Personnel Bylaw, because many of those things weren't necessarily looked at, and many things conflicted with one another. And then also to make recommendations to the Personnel Board to change in the personnel bylaws. We took it upon ourselves to try to alter the original personnel bylaw, as you saw at the last town meeting, and did a great job with the 3 or 4 things that we were able to, but we made the realization at that point in time that the personnel policy and human resources laws tend to move a lot faster than we as a town can accommodate at our 2 yearly town meetings, okay? And because of this, we felt that the only way that this could be changed would be to have it so that we can maneuver things a lot more quickly. The Commonwealth and the federal government obviously do give towns, communities, and municipalities the ability to change things in a much slower motion than average people do. But if we miss something or we don't catch something, then it makes it very difficult for us to do this. So the suggestion was made that we find an alternative, allowing us to have a checks and balances system in place that allows the necessary oversight to satisfy both the citizens of the town, the taxpayers, the employees, and the boards of the town, while allowing for us to maneuver a lot faster so we don't violate federal and state law. Okay, so what you see in front of you in the personnel bylaw and the personnel policy and procedure manual is what accomplishes this. Rather than waiting until May and November of each year to make any changes necessary, we can now utilize a system of public meetings with appropriate notices that are posted in town places and other places like the post office, as by law we are required to do for any of those things like town meetings, so that we can make the changes when necessary, allowing the town to be more maneuverable, and also allow for employees and town people to come to us with any changes that might be more of a sensitive nature when it comes to employees. But if you or anyone in the room has any questions, we have myself and then Marcia here from the Personnel Board. We're more than happy to answer any of them for you. So. I know it's a lot.
I guess my question, I'll cut you off for just a second.
Sure.
When you said you're able to maneuver that much more quickly, can I talk about that for just a second?
So basically what we have is a very, very slimmed down version of the personnel bylaw. So, going from the 30 or 40 pages that we have now, we do have the ability to then change, things that are out there. So the personnel bylaw and its effect defines who the personnel board is, how you guys create and apply us to the personnel board, the composition of, what's required for us to go on a thing. And then also for the method of administration, then secondly, for the personnel policy and procedure manual. So what this does is, as you can see now and what we saw at the last town meeting, when we wanted to make changes to the longevity statutes, to the military leave and other documentations that are out there, what ends up happening is that we can now change those on the personnel and policy procedure manual. We're not required to go to town meeting to make those changes. So for example, when most recently the Commonwealth of Massachusetts passed the Pregnant Workers Leave Act, not only did we have to post that notice publicly online, but we had to have a policy change. Well, the issue that we came to is that we have until like January 1st or something like that to, put those into motion. Well, if we don't have a policy or procedure document written in place fast enough, then we're going to be caught outside of the law, and there's been many of these things over time that we've had in regards to sick time legislation, Domestic Violence Leave Act, and other documents. So what we can do here is that if an item of such of this nature becomes apparent, we can post in a public meeting with a 2-week notice to make the determination, and then we would review through the policy and procedure manual and make the recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and that would be the only way that personnel policies could be changed, is that the personnel board would review and approve any of the changes to the documentation. Then they were then presented on to the Board of Selectmen to make the ultimate vote, in which you would see the policies, but you would be able to amend these policies that are out there. Leaving a checks and balances system where elected officials on the Board of Selectmen aren't the only ones making the changes, but the personnel board would have to be able to, indoctrinate and send them over to you guys. So.
I just got one quick question. Is there any big changes to working conditions or anything that the employees aren't aware of? Or do they have
No,
any
I
input or anything?
think one of the things that you have, and if you guys have the documents in front of you, I can just take you through some of the, the small changes based upon the last one. I don't know if you guys looked at the last one that was out there, but.
I didn't put it out.
Well, I'll just answer that last question while everybody gets prepared. Sandy, again, has worked very closely with the personnel board and has circulated this rules and regulations document to all the department heads and the boards and committees that manage personnel. They've all had a chance to review it, and they have, for those ones that wish, they have provided input. That input has been taken into consideration by the personnel board, and they made those changes.
So just going through most of the information that we have that are out there and the changes that are out there, there are a few major changes, I think, that we had, but not many.
From what was posted in the agenda to today after we received
Right.
feedback from the department heads.
Oh, yeah, then we'll
there
go
was
through those
some
numbers.
Really
Yeah.
minor changes.
Yeah.
That were incorporated into revision 8, if you will.
Yeah, so if you guys want to go, I'll take you through the changes that came from the meeting that they had this morning with all the department heads. So on page 2, under Administration of Regulations 1.2-1, about 3/4 of the way down the page, it's the blue section there, we just added in the third line after laws, we just referred to the Chapter 8 of the Town Manager Act, just so it was an additional reference that was there. And then throughout the rest of the document, there are certain sections that said in regards to who the people were who were responsible. So for example, in regards to recruitment and interview, in addition to the town manager, the appointing authority, we also added the department head to that. That just basically said the department head could be there to choose who the people would be to interview, and then also be present at the interview process and to make those determinations.
What section was that again?
Oh, that's under section 213. Under recruitment. The first line originally had read just the town manager or a designee of the town manager, the appointing authority, or the department head. Okay. And then we added department head on page 5 to the application center, the same process where it says the appointing authority, and then we added department head. The selection section, which is the next section, where it says the appointing authority or department head. And then the last part of that section where we didn't write, which is already supposed to be there, but interviews are not subject to the open meeting law as they are private. So, and then page 13.
215.
Those were the 2 on 5.
Yeah, that's
Not like 215.
And then there's just 1 on 6.
Oh, did I miss 6? Sorry. Yeah, so on page 6, I'm sorry. Reasons for rejection under 215, thank you. The town manager or designee of the town manager or appointing authority may reject any candidate who does not possess the minimum qualifications required for the position, any application not filled by the announced closing date, or the inability to meet any contingencies outlined in an offer of employment. It wasn't spelled out before, so. And then page 13 was the next one. In regards to section 6 on leaves and related benefits with holidays. One of the meetings that they had this morning with the department heads was to match the CBAs in regards to the documents. We added the day after Thanksgiving as a recognized holiday because that matches the CBAs. And then on page 24.
Sorry, I should know this. What's the CDA?
CBA. It's the
Collective bargaining agreement. It's,
Yes.
it's the rules and regulations that union employees have to follow.
Yeah. it's just out of
So we
context.
pretty much mirror most of the community bargaining agreements to the personnel board when looking at COLA and other requirements that are out there, so. And then the chief of police, Chief Bradley, did mention to us on page 24, under section 8.5-1, the substance abuse policy, we're gonna get the KP law involved in regards to the specific, but after that first sentence, we're going to apply something of this nature that says, this section does not apply to law enforcement officers during the performance of their official duties in compliance with police department policies and procedures. So I'll draw your attention back to our original personnel bylaw, in which one of the things it said in regards to the alcohol policy was that on occasion, police officers are involved in police training in which they have to understand the concept of, being intoxicated, I guess. So there's something that's part of their official training that requires them to drink on the job. But it's only during those times that, so basically if your boss tells you you have to drink so that you can understand how a breathalyzer, demonstration works, I guess it doesn't happen often, but again, I know, not that I'm aware of, so. I guess their CBAs are much more heavily invited in regards to other, drug screening things, so I doubt that they can partake of anything else during during their work, but.
KP will write that up.
Yeah, KP will write the specific, Yeah. So yeah, KP law needs to review through all this. So basically, at the town meeting, we'll be reviewing through and rescinding the current personnel bylaw as in effect and replacing it with a smaller version with the inclusion that the personnel policy and procedure manual will be done. And we made sure that we stepped our effort. We met 2 or 3 times a month over the last 6 months just to make sure that we could fulfill getting this done in time for this, for this November town meeting, so.
KP has
Great effort.
already vetted the personal bylaw.
Yes.
So that's.
Just not the personal procedures and policy.
Separate from the procedures manual. Yeah, that's great.
But, outside of that, I think the only other documentation that we had, we just met most of the stuff that was there in regards to the TMA Act to make sure that, it was all there. But obviously, if anybody has any questions or concerns in regards to that stuff, obviously they can, speak with Derek, who can get the information to me, or obviously the personnel email, the personnel board email is on the website, and we'll be meeting once or twice again before the town meeting to go over any questions or concerns that people have, so.
Any other questions? Sorry.
I don't have any other questions.
I don't either.
Cool.
So,
from the
Do
public.
we need a motion for this, or is this just going to town hall?
yes,
Okay.
so I'll make a motion that we approve the updated personnel policy and procedures manual contingent on the final edits provided by KP Law.
Second the motion?
It's unanimous action.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Looks like you guys put a lot of work into that.
Yeah, I know, we're not done yet. We gotta go downstairs and meet yet.
Thank you again.
All right, thanks, guys.
So next on the agenda is we got to review the special town meeting warrant. Special town meeting is scheduled for November 13th at 7 p.m. So. Do you guys want to go through every article, or do you just have articles that you guys have picked out that you want to review?
I mean, I've gone through it. I don't know if we should open it up for questions from the town, but I don't have any specific questions about it.
I guess, do you want to go article by article and then just
Sure,
say
just quickly go
a
through
yay
it.
or nay? But I guess we could just say if we want to hold it.
Is there any articles? Yeah, we can just go real quick.
Yeah, why don't we go through them and read them so they're on the record, just quickly. We don't have to read them all, do we?
I'm just going to paraphrase kind of what they're about
Yeah, there
instead
you
of
go.
reading the full thing. Basically, the Article 1 is to take money from some extra money we have, 200,000, and add it to the stabilization account.
So I'll just speak briefly. So that's just a standard article that we hold every year. If there are extra dollars, it's something we want to consider, always trying to bolster our stabilization account, knowing that at some point in the future we'll hit a recession and the stabilization account is where we'll go to maintain services. So that $200,000 is not a fixed number. We still don't have our free cash. We still don't know at this point if there'll be any dollars remaining that we would put towards stabilization. So that's a placeholder.
So you're saying that 200,000 may not be the number we actually go to town meeting with?
That's right, right.
Okay. I mean, I would be.
Yeah, I'm always a fan of saving money for lean times. We're in good times now, but it won't always be that way.
Right.
So the next Article 2A is from, that's from the CP, for the Community Preservation Fund, and they're just asking to place some additional money into the historic account, open space account, and the community housing account. Questions on that?
Nope.
Nope.
Article B is also from CPA, and it is to for debt services in the sums of $43,488.57.
Are you on 2B or are you on?
Yes, 2B.
2B.
Because the first part of 2B is this 291,000?
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Oh, for a total.
The 291 is for the town hall bond payment.
So we got that one. Then we have a 43,000 for what was the second one for? Just
So it's a
historic.
total of $291,000.
The 291 is the total of the two below, Steve.
Okay.
Okay. Yep.
2C. This is also 2C is also from CPC. And this is asked to transfer the sum of $10,000 from the CPA Historical Reserve, Resource Reserve to where's that money going to? To a
So I'll explain this one. The CPC has voted in the affirmative to appropriate $10,000 from their funds to the Historic Commission so that they can use this money to go ahead and document and preserve the history of buildings prior to them being demoed.
So this is going from the CPA's fund to the CPC.
It's going to go from CPC to the Historic Commission.
Okay.
Okay.
I think Article 3. Any questions on that one? On Article 3, I think this is the one that Steve has. Is this yours?
So yes. So that number then is going to be 1550 and 1750. So that would be 4750. 4,750,000.
And you want to see this one on, or do you think it would be better wait until May for this one with all the other salaries?
Well, then it would be a line item change. It wouldn't be a warrant article.
So the folks know what we're debating. This is Article 3, which is giving the Board of Selectmen a raise.
What do you think? Do you think you?
I don't support this.
Okay. And you, Gary?
And I think if we did any time, it should be in May with all the other, anytime you increase anybody else's salaries.
Okay, so you want to hold it?
Yeah.
Or delete it? Or just delete it then?
Yeah.
So you can withdraw it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Favor
Yep.
withdraw?
I'm in favor of that.
Okay. Article 4 is a sum of $4,200, and it is for some collective bargaining agreements for the DPW supervisors. It's just some additional funds that we budgeted after they settled their contract.
Right, so the supervisor's contract has been settled, and so it's effective July 1st, 2018. So these dollars, it's actually, that's a typo, it should be $5,000, not $4,200. And that $5,000 will cover the cost of the collective bargaining agreement for fiscal year 19.
Any other questions on Article 4? None. Article 5 is from the treasurer collector. This is for some appropriated funds. This is just to encumber some extra money for some loans that we have for the TIP project, the Quinton Bridge. It's some anticipated notes. It's for the sum of $10,265. Let's see. Article 6 is for $400,000. It's for a complete replacement of the roof and the HVAC system on the police station. And this has been approved from FinCom through free cash. It's not been approved, but is that what you're recommending it coming from, free cash?
I haven't thought about it.
Finance Committee is going to meet next Wednesday to review all the financial articles.
So this is what you're recommending, this wasn't from FinCom?
That was for discussion at the meeting that was
I
held 2 weeks
misunderstood.
ago.
I thought that was their recommendations, I'm sorry.
One thing I wanted to bring up to you gentlemen, when Senator Moore and Rep. Meridian came and spoke to us a couple of months ago, there's some money that it was earmarked, I believe, for the fire station roof. So one thing I asked Derek to look into was, if we do appropriate money, is that going to not allow us to go after potential bond money for that purpose? So the whole idea last year with doing the study on the roofs was to make sure that we were able to apply for any grants that may be available, for public safety buildings, for those roofs. And again, they had some money that was earmarked. I want to say it was $300,000. So that was the only question I had about these two articles, is if we do put these articles forward and that grant money is available, we want to make sure that we can get that money. And obviously, it wouldn't cost the taxpayer. It would be state money, not town's money. So.
Right, so I can respond to that. We did submit last year a request under the capital improvement bond bill. The request was for $300,000 for the roof at the fire department and $80,000 to the life pack monitors. And then we requested an additional $500,000 for the DPW design and $400,000 for recreation. We were told at this past June that it was passed through the legislature. I've since talked to Rep. Meridian, and although it passed through the legislature, there's still no funding behind it. So they would have to go out and bond this legislature, and so that hasn't happened yet. And as it's been described, it doesn't, just because it went through the legislature, that doesn't mean it's going to actually happen. We're not exactly clear if this is going to come to reality. Rep. Meridian will look into whether or not if there is an authorization at town meeting and the bond is passed, say this spring, will that disqualify the town from go ahead and seeking state monies versus using local dollars? And he said he'll hopefully get that answer back to us by the end of this week.
Great. So this is to spend $4,000 to do the police roof and HVAC.
That's right.
400,000?
Yeah, did I say? Yeah, 400,000. Yeah. Oh, no, not 4,000. 400,000. I wish it was $4,000. Take that all day. $400,000.
But if it doesn't get passed, then we're a year behind, and then you're looking at the increases of normal.
Right, and as you can recall, at the annual town meeting, $8,000 was appropriated so that we could hire an engineering firm to go in and evaluate both the fire and the police roofs, and that has been conducted, and Gale & Associates has recommended a complete replacement. The police roof has gone beyond its useful life, so it's been almost 30 years. It is leaking, it is damaged. The HVAC system is shorting out throughout the summer months, so it's certainly time that we have to repair this roof.
So we have time before the town meeting to get the information regarding the grant, so that at the town meeting we can give the voters that information before they would vote. So we can leave it on here, in other words, and get that information and then share it at town meeting so people can use that.
If we find out something, we can always withdraw it that night.
Right, we can always pass over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I think the Division of Local Services had an announcement. We got an email a few weeks ago where the state had $1 billion excess money. So they had some particular circuit breaker issues and some other issues where that money's available to the towns and municipalities. So whether or not that carries forward for fiscal 19, but again, we don't want to disqualify ourselves from those bonds.
We definitely
I'm
don't
sorry,
want to
that
do that.
grant, if it's, if it is available.
That's for sure.
Just leave them for now and then you can always. Yeah.
think
I know Mr.
I
Taylor.
just have a question, that 400,000,
Yes.
that includes the design, the oversight of it, and the replacement, the actual work to put the new roof on?
Yes.
Okay, does that go out to bids?
Yes,
Okay, so it might be less than 400,000.
absolutely.
Thank you.
I know Mr. Taylor, you got
So Bill Taylor, 211 North Street. I was just, depending upon the timing of the project, we may be able to submit some part of it, maybe the HVAC system for a grant through the Green Communities Program. Just something to think about as we go forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have a breakdown of what the roof versus just the HVAC system? Do we know what that breakdown is?
Yes. According to Gale and Associates, the roof replacement itself, and this is just the construction part of it, is $310,000. No, sorry, $250,000. And then the HVAC system for the replacement of the 3 units is $60,000. And then we have quotes to the roof design is $30,000 for the design, and then the oversight, we're not exactly certain, but it could be anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 for the project management. To have an engineer go there, do the inspection, sign off, make sure that it was installed according to the specifications, and give us a warranty. So that's how we arrive at the 400,000 number.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
what's the warranty on that car?
We're looking into the warranty right now. We're not exactly certain, but we think it's, on that roof there, the warranty? Yeah, no, I'm not, I think it's,
On the membrane.
oh, on a new rubber membrane? I don't know, I'd have to look into it. I'm not really sure.
That would probably come out once we bid it, what type of warranty they would offer us.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I was thinking of the fire roof for a second there.
And then that was Article 6, and then the fire roof is for 100,000 for a roof, and that's just patching, or is that like one section? Or?
Right, so that would be to repair the fire department's roof. Again, Gale and Associates did their analysis. So we know that the cost to repair is $70,000. We'll then need design money and oversight money. Gale and Associates has suggested that if we do the repair, it'll extend the life of that roof for another additional 5 to 10 years.
Are they just like fixing spots, or are they fixing?
Yeah. Yeah, fixing flashing. There's a few areas where the shingles have been removed because of ice damage, and then fixing a number of leaks throughout the roof.
Questions, sir?
No, I guess my only question would be, how much would a full replacement cost in 5 or 10 years when we get to that point, so that we have it on our radar?
Right. Right now, if we would do a
Is it somewhere in
full,
the order of $400,000 or $500,000? Is it similar to the
yeah,
police?
so
station?
a full replacement, not including design money or project management money, is slated at about $350,000 just for a full replacement. That's today's dollar.
Is there anything they could do instead of shingles that would last longer?
I've
The
heard
metal
folks,
roof
some
would
folks
last?
suggest metal roofing. That may be money well spent.
How long would it last if we didn't do the repairs? Do we know? I mean, like, what kind of, is there damage being done? Is
Yeah,
the roof
there's damage
leaking?
being
Is
done,
there-
there's active leaking, especially, not the front of the building, the side of the building where there's that smaller roof. There's been a lot of wattage damage there because they had gone up on the roof in the past and used shovels to remove some of the ice dams, and they created some serious damage on that section of the roof.
Okay.
So there's active leaking in that.
They've got a lot of leaking in their dispatch area too.
Yeah, that's the section I'm referring to, yeah. That side section.
So it needs to be repaired. Okay.
You guys all good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Article 8 is broken up into 4 articles, and it all has to do with marijuana. Article 8A is for the marijuana overlay district. And that was for, that one prohibits the,
So Article 8A is, what I heard was the I guess, the top choice by the Board of Selectmen when you have voted to create an overlay district in the two C&I zones. The zone headed towards Hopedale is to allow everything but retail. And then for the C&I district down by the railroad station was just to be for manufacturing and for laboratories. So that's what Article 8A, and just so we.
These are hard to read, they don't
Well,
make
because,
a lot
yeah,
of-
KP Law, they're still
Not all-
working on it.
it's not in
The-
here yet.
These are just placeholders right now. They're still working on the
I was about to
regulations.
say, they look the same.
We had a meeting this morning with KP, just so they were clear as to the best approach to create these bylaws. So the first one is an overlay district that allows everything but retail.
And so, just, I don't have questions about these particular ones. We've talked to them, spent a lot of time talking about the different options. We need to have a plan for someone to present all of these options and sort of give a succinct statement about what they are. So is KP Law going to do that? Will you do that?
Yeah, so KP Law is going to draft up a handout
Okay.
for town meeting.
Yeah.
Where it'll be very clear, it'll say, for example, Article 8A, a yes vote means this, a no vote means this.
And we put like maps on there, like just a simple, like, here's so people know what the overlay district is, because that's
Yeah,
going to be a
we
big part of
talked
it, is
about
where are we
creating
talking about?
Right.
Or put it up on the screen, or, I don't care how we do it, but people are going to want to know
Yeah.
what the overlay district is, where the C&I zones are. Like, the average person has no idea what any of that is.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
So 8A is everything but retail. What's 8B gonna be?
8B is allowing all uses.
8C is a complete ban, and
Right.
8D is a moratorium.
That's right.
Yeah, I just have trouble figuring out 8A
So,
and 8B.
so just to be clear, so 8A is everything but retail up off of 140
Mhm.
in the C&I district, and then warehouses and labs in the C&I district over by the railroads.
Yep.
8B is allowing all of those plus retail, or all uses in the C&I zones up off 140 and by the train station.
No. So up by 140 is all uses, as you
Yeah.
described, but we've kept the train station
Okay.
just.
So no matter
manufacturing
what,
and-
by the train station, it's just going to be those two
Right,
uses.
because of the close proximity to the school.
The schools, okay.
Yep.
Got it. Sorry,
Okay.
that's helpful.
Yep, yep.
And then C is a total ban, which would then have to go to the voters to vote on and get a majority of the voters in the folder.
And just so we're clear that if the vote that is taken is to ban just retail but allow the other uses, we will still have to go to the voters
Yeah.
for that one as well.
Yeah, so they'll explain that for sort of option B, C, and C that, or A and B, we'd have to,
A and B?
A and C.
A and C, we'd have to go
They
to
need
the
a vote.
polls.
D doesn't?
D would just be a moratorium, yeah.
So
Just
D
like
is
we
the
have now.
moratorium.
But we have to go to the state for approval?
For moratorium, yeah, we'll have to go just for the AG's office just to.
See if people have questions.
Does anybody have any questions on this article?
Good?
You have any answer on this?
Pardon?
You good with the marijuana?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, subject to the final approval.
Yeah.
Final write-up.
Let's see here. Article 9 is proposed by the Board of Assessors, and this is to allow veterans to work in town for some tax relief. That's similar to the senior work-off program.
That's right.
Hmm.
Great.
Article 10 is an update of the general bylaws. It's just going to spell out street numbering and naming a little bit better. It clears a lot of things up. I don't know if anybody, I can have the town manager elaborate on this. Or...
Yeah, I'm happy to talk a little bit about it. So, I think overall, in the general sense, a lot of the articles that are going to the special town meeting are really kind of outgrowths of issues that have come up in the past year and that we want to get resolved. And street naming was an issue when we were dealing with the Pulte project. There were a number of names that were recommended to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen, by the Historical Commission, was ready to vote on those. And then, I guess, luckily, the fire chief and police chief had heard about these names, and they kind of put a stop to that because they weren't brought in that conversation. So we want to ensure through this amended bylaw that we engage fire, police, DPW, and code enforcement through the Historical Commission before any street names are recommended to the Planning Board and the Board of Selectmen. And that's what this bylaw is geared towards.
Any questions?
Nope.
Let's see. That was Article 10, Article 11. You want to talk about Article 10? It's also from the Historic Commission, Derek. I'm not sure.
Article 11?
11?
Yeah.
Yeah. Article 11 is by the, again, the Historical Commission, again, trying to address some issues. They are proposing to amend the demolition delay bylaw. There was a lot of ambiguity in the current bylaw, and they've sent that on to code enforcement, because code enforcement, they're the ones that actually approve the demolition permit. So they were now working with code enforcement to update the demolition delay bylaw. So again, so it's very clear as to the process and what needs to get done by the Historic Commission to approve that demolition delay. That'll, once approved by code, it'll be sent to KP Law for a final.
So this is like a house in the 1700s. If the code wants to tear down, this is the procedure.
Yeah,
to go through?
so for example, if there was like you said, a house that was built in the 1700s, it's a historic structure. Those types of structures, if the property owner wanted to tear it down, they would file for a demolition permit, and then the code enforcement officer would have to refer to the Historic Commission. Under the bylaw, Historic Commission has they have up to 6 months in which they can delay the demolition so that they can find another use for it. And so that the current demolition delay bylaw wasn't very clear as to the process and the number of days which an appeal can be brought forward. So the amended one is to provide clarity to that process.
Any questions, sir?
Nope.
Sure.
So that's Article 11. Article 12 is just to ask for more detailed expense and revenue from boards that do not report to the Board of Selectmen.
Yes.
Mr. McGuire?
Mr. Chairman, a question, comment. Will you consider capital projects in this request also? Because they sometimes can affect this revolving account also.
Yes, I think that, I guess, my impression of that is, as you know, take for instance, the way the enterprise funds work, we ask, when it's presented at the annual town meeting, we ask that any capital expenditures are on there. This should be presented the same way. As you and I both know, there was an issue regarding a gatehouse that was not presented. So this should be the corrective action to that.
We just got to make sure the boards that we either give them examples or lay out the expectations, because it's kind of vague how it reads, what you really want.
Does that answer your question?
Well, I'm not sure. I understand the reason for doing the revenue and the expenses, and so we can flag that and be aware of it and prove it. But also you do have situations where potentially with the Trask Field and the other, you may be making improvements which are going to be capital right around that 25K limit. So they really should be forecasting and budgeting that also.
So you're suggesting a budget forecast for the elected boards? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Yeah, for their revolving accounts.
Maybe that complicates this too much, and it might be something we should consider next time, but I mean, they're going to have capital.
Right, because that's not explicitly in here, right? This is more just of a reporting of the detail of what happened with the revolving funds.
Yeah, this is, it reads, all revolving fund budgets shall be submitted with detailed expense and revenue line items. I mean, we can provide clarity in this. We could include capital requests as well. I mean, this is what this conversation is for. We can certainly provide clarity to this now. This is a placeholder, so this is a good time to have that conversation.
Yeah, so I would think adding capital expenses Makes sense, right? Is that
Well,
what
yeah,
you're
I mean, I would
suggesting?
think that we would probably want to, do you have a suggested limit that you were thinking?
Well, I mean, right now, any project that's 25,000 or more has to go to the capital committee, or should.
Right, but we would expect something of much lesser amount to be presented at the budget.
Yeah.
Well, there's still a procurement process too, right? So even if someone wants to spend $15,000, they still have to go through a procurement process with you, right, Derek?
They would still, right, have to go through the procurement process, right.
Right, so-
Right now, capital budget approves any capital project above $25,000. I think that's what Mr. Mavai is driving at, that
Right. And
where
that's
are
true
the
for
checks and
elected-
balances to
that's true-
ensure.
That's true for elected and non-elected boards?
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
So they should be following that process anyways, I guess is my point.
And with checks and balances with the purchasing going through the town manager, I think that will be sufficient.
Aren't
okay.
the capital things kind of voted on and, like, you know, if you buy something, it says this is this, you don't really have a budget to present.
Well, the problem with the revolving account up until now is that the revolving account at town meeting, the town meeting members are just voting on a cap.
Right.
And so they're not voting on capital improvements within that budget, they're not voting on salary within that budget, they're not voting on.
So you were asking for it to break it down further. So if you have a
Right.
capital project coming out of revolving account, to spell that out.
Right.
And just not every
Right.
capital expenditure.
So if you look at our DPW budget, it's very clear. You got wages and all their operating expenses, whether it's fuel, tree trimming, snow, so on and so forth. And so that's, maybe we need to provide clarity, maybe this isn't clear enough, but that the revolving fund budget shall be submitted with detailed expenses and revenue line items. But the expenses would be your budget, what you're proposing your expenses would be.
So, can I ask a question? I'm sorry. Are you looking to have, because right now we do a bulk vote at the annual town meeting for the cap. So are you looking to have the town meeting voters vote the budget for revolving funds, or is it
No.
just, no?
No, that
Like,
should, no,
it's
we're
just-
looking for that budget, that detailed budget to be submitted to the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee in advance of going to town meeting.
Okay.
So that the Finance Committee has eyes on it, can talk about that detailed budget versus just approving a total expenditure.
It's a reporting function and a transparency function, as opposed to adding complexity to the town meeting.
I think similar to the enterprise funds, where it would show wages, and it would show capital, and it would show, say, insurance or debt service or whatever.
But the enterprise funds are voted by town meeting, so I just wanted to get clarification.
It's a little different.
I think,
Additional budgets, that would be.
But it kind of makes sense.
well, I think it should actually be on a warrant article similar to the way, I think it's usually typically, 2, 3, or 4 would typically be the way enterprise funds are voted.
Yeah, but you have 13 revolving funds that you would have to be adding to the annual town meeting warrants for everyone to review and vote.
And I would add, the statute is very clear about revolving funds, and you're voting the cap on a revolving fund. And so what this article is really aimed at doing is providing, as Selectman Stein pointed out, that transparency with the Finance Committee, with the Board of Selectmen, so it's very clear what their budget is for that year. Even though, again, like wages for typical departments, you're voting on the lump sum, you're not voting on the detail behind the wages. So this is a very similar process.
Yeah, and I think this is a very positive step forward and will accomplish a lot of the goals we've laid out, and it's not our last chance to amend this, so if something does work or doesn't work, or we want to change something, we can always come back at it and make an amendment, either for this town meeting or in the future, after the town meeting vote.
Any other questions, sir?
Not here.
You good to go?
Yep.
So Article 13, we talked about earlier with the personnel, and this was for the consolidated personnel bylaw. You want to speak on 14 for me, Derek?
Yeah, so Article 14, so the language that's written in Article 14 is a direct pull from today's personnel bylaw, not the proposed one. And so in today's personnel bylaw, there's a section in there that speaks to elected officials and their stipends at $750 for the chair and $500 for the other members. Because we have revised the personnel bylaw, we need to make sure that we have those stipends somewhere. And so the best place for that is to put it in the general bylaws where it's very clear what the stipends will be for elected officials.
And so just to be clear, this doesn't represent any change in any of the amounts for any compensation for any elected officials.
This is the current stipend amounts for all elected officials.
Okay. Thank you.
Pulling it from one book and putting it into another book.
And 15 is the same thing?
No,
That's-
15 was a placeholder for if the board voted in favor of changing the salary, raise and appropriate for FY19. We would have then had to make that change, like the change I just discussed above. But given the fact that you
We can
voted
remove
against
this.
that, we'll withdraw this.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, now getting back to 14, by putting the section 2A, voting that in, then you really can't change your wage lines at that point.
Right.
Okay.
So
Even for fiscal 20.
No, in the Maytown meeting, you could amend that section right there. At the Maytown meeting, which would take effect July 1st for FY20.
Yep.
So Article 16, this is for $25,000 for another set of design options for the DPW facility. So I know we just spent $25,000, so
I mean, I wouldn't be in favor of spending another 25,000, especially if we have another warrant article coming up for 50,000. We've got there's a lot of spending on this warrant, so we've got to find some cuts somewhere.
I'm just trying to think what this $25,000 gets you.
I think for me, it's a question of when we think we want to make a serious investment in the DPW. If we don't see the town making an investment like that anytime in the next few years, then it's probably not worth spending $25,000 to do an analysis, to answer the questions we asked when we got the $12 million proposal. I think it's pretty clear that the town's not in a position to support a $12 million DPW renovation. And I think we asked a lot of questions to try to get some alternatives and say, hey, is there a phased-in approach where we spend $1 million a year for 5 years, or $1 million and $3 million, or $5 million, or whatever it was? And we asked them to come back with alternatives. Obviously, to get those alternatives costs money, because you have to have engineers and consultants put together those packages, do that analysis, put together those proposals. But again, I think if we're not seriously considering investing in the DPW anytime in the next few years, then I don't think it's worth spending $25,000. If we are, and if we think we do need to make some investments in the DPW, then it's probably worth doing the analysis to see what the options are. But I mean, there's three of us. I don't know, Kirk, what else you'd.
But I think after our last meeting with FinCom, I think it was more of a library was put in the front burner than DPW.
The community center, yeah, I agree with that. I think that there were a few things put on the list. I would agree with that. But we have a position on that too. So I don't know. Do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would speak to that because we do know that we have major needs at the DPW, whether they're environmental needs or structural building needs, and the board did pose a number of questions to the engineer. And there were a lot of, I thought, really interesting options that were thrown out that evening. And so in order to keep this and understand what those options would be and what those costs would be, the $25,000. And again, $25,000 a placeholder. If we don't use $25,000, if we only use 7 or 8, well, that's all we would use as we keep this ball in the air. Now, I guess the question that I would have is, it's been suggested by the treasurer collector that when the debt's coming off, the town may be able to afford up to $7 million of capital reinvestment without impacting the tax rate. And so if we don't pursue this, but we only pursue the community center, and they come back with a $4 million proposition, that means there's $3 million that we could have invested in a multi-phase DPW where
The lights automatically go off at 9 and then starting later, we gotta.
As good as it gets.
Derek,
on
you
a-
look good on camera. That was good. You had like a glow-in-the-dark hue.
it's Halloween.
I know.
Yeah, exactly.
That was Steve's way of saving 50 cents.
So,
Wrap it up.
Yeah, so as I was saying, without continuing to keep this conversation alive, my fear would be that there are other options, and there could be less expensive options. And so if the committee came back with a $6 million option, we just invested $25,000 to save, $3, $4, $5 million. And I think that's a great return on the investment. But we don't know, and we won't be able to ever answer those questions if we don't make this investment today.
It just seems like we're just throwing 25,000 here, 25,000 there. It's just,
You have a question in the crowd?
Pardon my ignorance, first of all.
you just introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Meredith Rice, Middle Lane. 25,000 for the study, that's already been done. And they came back and said it's going to cost 11 million for what the DPW needs or wants to have done. So far, am I
Yes,
on this?
100%.
Now, can we, instead of just assuming it's going to cost 11 million, have people come in and do bids? Take just one aspect of the DPW, like maybe the garage, or another aspect for the building itself with the lunchroom or whatever. Whatever it is, have qualified contractors come in and offer, maybe 3 or 4 for each thing, and offer bids. Why do we have to assume it's going to be 11 million? Because the study said, well, if you want this, it's going to be this. If you want this, it's going to be this.
No, you're absolutely right. We could, but that's where Derek was going with. You need some type of design to bid out, and if we don't do
Because
something,
there are certain things that when I visit down the DPW, I obviously can see how many years has Dennis and Carol and whoever else been sitting in that trailer. And when I go in the door where the guys who work very hard are at one little table eating their lunch, and in the back is one guy with all this trucks and vehicles. And I just think they need some help, but I don't know if 11 million is just beyond my comprehension.
Yeah, I think maybe moving forward, I think one thing that we need to really think about is we know approximately what our amount, what the amount is that we can borrow without impacting the tax rate. We know approximately the issues that we have at hand. So perhaps moving forward, it would be a good idea to kind of set a budget before we go forward with plans and designs and all these other issues, because then we won't be, unfortunately, as we all were, I think, at the last presentation or the DPW presentation, more or less floored with those numbers. So I think it would be helpful to set a budget going forward. Again, I don't know if that's feasible, but something even with Council of Aging and Library, if we have a rough idea what the budget should be before we start drawing plans and hiring consultants and all this other. Because then you're putting a lot of work in a direction that you may not be able to fulfill.
Is the trailer still rented?
yes.
Yes.
Would it make sense to replace it with like a modular home? Because
That would be something to study.
that would be that would be how many hundreds of thousands? It would be so much cheaper, and in the long run, we're at least saving money on it. Because again, the trailer's kind of, after all these years, is not in very good shape.
I'm not even sure how much we pay.
And that's the thought process of having a phased-in approach, that you can check, that to Ms. Rice's point, that there are probably half a dozen items we need to upgrade. We have to upgrade the administration. We have to upgrade the environmental, the wash bays. We have to upgrade the training in the break room. And so a phased-in approach over a period of 10 years, these dollars will be used to kind of set that type of timeline up.
That would actually kind of cut down at least on throwing money away on rent.
Right. That's right.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a suggestion. And that is that we set up a committee of Upton residents to take a look at this, define the higher priority issues. Maybe it's the trailers, maybe it's the EPA possible issues, and define what the priorities are, look at the requirements, and then try and figure out a phased-in approach, working with this engineering firm to define the highest priority items and address those, and work to some sort of master plan, which I think the folks gave us. I mean, it may not be the one we choose to go with, but then, like Derek says, use a phased-in approach if you decide to do that.
Yeah, the challenge is that, the challenge is that looking at any of those alternatives in any realistic way requires a professional. And so the consultant's not going to partner with us or help us unless we pay them. So if we want to investigate the alternatives, then we need to have a consulting firm to partner with. If we want to have a committee prioritize, that's a different conversation, right? Like we could have, it doesn't cost us anything to put together a list of priorities because we've got the proposal that was done. We could say, you know what, we're not going to do all of this at once. We want to look at these, of the 8 things they proposed, this is how we would prioritize them. And then we could engage a consulting firm to look at each one of those in isolation, say, we're not going to pay $25,000. We're going to pay $5,000 for a consultant to work with us to put together a wash bay proposal that might cost us $1.5 million or $800,000 or whatever it is. But you still, at some point, you still need to pay those people. So that's the challenge. Is we're either not doing anything and not pursuing anything related to a DPW, or we are pursuing it. If we are pursuing it, then we need to pay a consultant to help us.
But we also do, according to the town bylaws, eventually we do need to make a committee to study this.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not suggesting we wouldn't make a committee at all. I'm just saying that if we...
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you decide not to go forward, then we don't need a committee, but maybe not.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I just didn't know if there was a cheaper
So the
alternative.
other thing is we could punt it to the spring. There's no reason we couldn't punt it off 6 months to the spring, right? We could,
You can always delay it.
we could let the voters decide, right? I mean, it's partly on us to put together the warrant, and it's partly on us to let the voters vote. So, I think you make a case one way or the other and let the voters decide, but I'm fine either way.
Ms. Kelly?
Go ahead.
I think the plan, I think based on what we have been discussing, is exactly what Selectman Simon says. In order to move the project forward and determine phased-in approach, we would need a professional to assist us. So, but at the same time, getting a building committee or a feasibility committee together of residents where most of the data, most of the research has been gathered, that we wouldn't need to be paying, those funds wouldn't be expended for the data, but it would be mostly used for the different options that the town could use moving forward.
Is 25 like what they usually budget for all these projects? Or? I know that's what we spent roughly for the last one.
Right.
I mean, for me, when you're looking at spending $12 million or $5 million or $6 million, spending $25,000 to get it right, that seems like a really good use of money. But again, if we're not considering spending the money at any point, then I don't know why we would do it.
I think at this
Mary,
point,
the reason that we would spend it again is because we spent $25,000 to get a $12 million proposal. Perhaps what we could have done is worked with that company to give us 3 different proposals, $1 million proposal, a $5 million proposal, and a $10 million proposal, but we didn't do that. So I would suggest that if we spent this money, we would do exactly that. We would give them much clearer requirements around what we expect them to deliver for that $25,000. But again, if we're not going to spend the money, then we shouldn't spend this money. So.
Do you know if they have any money left over, or did they spend the full $25,000?
Right now, there's a balance of about 5, but we don't know if there's any outstanding invoices. So we have to check back with them and see if they're from that last session that they had.
Mm-hmm. I think this may be one we may want to pass over till May. Doesn't sound like there's a good consensus at this point. So I would hold it till May, myself.
Should we have them develop a town committee in the meantime so it keeps moving?
I guess we can talk about that after the town meeting. See what you think. It just seems to, conceivably, you're going to have 2 projects moving forward at the same time. And I just, frankly, you can't afford it. At the end of the day, you just can't.
Well, we don't know if we can afford it, right? That's the idea. If the community center comes in at $3 million and this comes in at $3 million, then we say, okay, we spent $6 million. If the community center comes in at $6 million and we realize that this is going to cost $6 million, then we sure as heck aren't able to do both of them, right?
Mhm.
But you don't know until you know the cost. But that's, again,
How far-
it sounds like you guys are on the same page. If
If we
you're on the
waited
same
till May,
page.
how far, if something was, how far behind the 8 ball would we be if we waited till May to do this, if we found out the community center was $3 million?
Well, I mean, we'd be 6 months behind.
Yeah.
And so the urgency behind the community center is because the debt's coming off in 18 months. And what you don't want is you don't want the debt to come off and then you have this
spike.
Well, you have this drop in the tax rate and people feel comfortable and then you have to increase the tax rate again. So people will be less likely to support something when they see the tax rate drop off because the debt came off.
Would you be in favor we cut that number in half, Steve?
Well, again, you have another study coming up on the page, so
Yeah, I know.
that's the problem. If you want to move this one forward, I would
Yeah,
say we hold the next one.
We don't
So-
all always have to agree, so I can disagree with
Obviously.
you guys if you feel.
Yeah, obviously.
If you feel strongly one way or the other, Gary,
I'm 50-50. I could go either way. I'm not, it's 25,000 we just spent.
If you want to move this article forward, and we'll hold the Library Council of Aging, we can hold that 50,000 till May.
I think the
If you're more
library,
comfortable doing
yeah,
that.
if we've got to keep one and punt one, then I would keep the Council on Aging and the library one, because I think that's a higher priority.
I still think it would be very helpful to set a budget before we appropriate any money. I think that's a mistake that we're making. Get an idea of what we're looking for square footage and what we're looking for to spend, and then put your proposals forward and your studies forward. But just my 2 cents.
Yeah, but doesn't I would think the committee that we've put in place would work with these consultants, right? We're not just going to have consultants going
and build something
hog wild to do whatever they want, right? We've got a committee that's looking at putting together a proposal for what the needs are, and then the money that we use for the consultant, I assume what they're developing is a proposal based on what the committee says the needs are. So does that make sense, Steve? So the committee comes up with what we need.
We can't, the problem is, I don't think we can always afford what we need. This is the problem. It's exactly, and it played out exactly the last presentation. You know, what you need isn't necessarily what you can afford. So I think you need to, you used some numbers earlier.
How do
those may
you
be-
figure out what the budget should be?
We know what we have to spend.
Right.
We already know what we have to spend, so now we have to prioritize.
Yeah.
What do you want to spend to take care of
How
those
much do you think
issues?
we have to spend?
$7 million.
Okay, so we have $7 million. So why wouldn't we go to one of these people and say,
We
either
have-
you each
yeah.
have $3.5 million, or one of you has $7 million, or
Well,
one of them's
there's-
4 and one of them's 2?
There's a
We
third.
know what the budget is, right?
Right, but there's a third, at the financial meeting, there was also a third idea that was put forward of capital investment. So again.
What
you
was
know,
the third idea?
Infrastructure was it?
Yeah.
It was, I think it was infrastructure.
Yeah, commercial development, got an idea?
Yeah, that one I thought was deprioritized because it would be too expensive.
Not sure. I
think
didn't
that-
hear it that way.
I don't know, he went to the second meeting.
Yeah, I was at the second meeting and we talked about all that, so.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Did they prioritize, at the meeting that you attended?
Yeah, nobody I talked to, well, the way it was described to me by the finance committee was the cost of putting sewer and water infrastructure up 140 to attract businesses would absolutely not be a good investment because it would be so expensive to get it up there. And there are so few parcels that would be able to take care of it or pay for it, to fund it, to finance it, that it doesn't make sense. It would make more sense that when you've got a business, you work with the business to help subsidize and put the infrastructure up there when you've got a business that wants to pay for it and help you pay for it. But to just put it in there in the hopes that you attract businesses isn't necessarily the best investment. Certainly not in the short run, possibly in the long run, but I don't know, you look like you want to say
Did they
something.
have any
No,
other?
that's what I heard at the
Yeah.
meeting as well.
Okay.
Did they have any other ideas of any other areas of town that they thought would be more beneficial?
For water and sewer?
Yes.
No, not that we talked about. No, the only thing we talked about really was consolidating the Council on Aging and the library into a community building across from the existing library. right, where that place is. So that was one conversation that was prioritized above these other ones, and people didn't think we should spend $12 million on a DPW, so that sort of got sidelined. So the highest priority is the community center. But to your point, we need to know what a budget is, but in my mind, we know the budget, which is the $6 or $7 million of debt that's rolling off. That cost, right? So
To divide it between two projects.
if we want to do both projects,
But the
right?
senior center could come in at 4 or 5 million. You know, and then you're back to.
Right, so my point is, we know the budget, right? We know we've got $6 or $7 million to spend, so if, or to give back or to do whatever with. So if we've got $6 or $7 million, that's the budget. We can have the community center put together a proposal. We can have the DPW put together a proposal, and we can look at them and say, okay, we have $7 million. We can do half of this and none of this. We can do all of this and part of this. But until you have those proposals, you don't know what you're deciding, because
You're going to end up in the same conundrum.
But if
You're
you're
gonna
doing it
have-
that way, you need this article. If you're doing it the way Brett's talking about, you need that money.
Right, that would be the idea, because otherwise, if we just have one proposal and we say, okay, the community center is going to cost us $3.5 million, and we don't have any realistic proposals to put together DPW, and we don't have any plans to spend that other $2.5 million.
Again, you're only 6 months behind. You have May, where you have your other issue you can bring
Yeah,
forward.
fair, totally. I totally agree with you.
Because I think
So,
what happens
I
is
think
if
it's
you
just
get a
losing that-
proposal for X number of dollars.
But we're talking about an
It's very
18-month
hard.
window. Keep in mind, we're talking about an 18-month window. So 6 months is a
Oh,
third
true,
of
but
that time.
True, but if you miss it by 6 months, that's not the end of the world.
But the debt
It just
already-
means, it just
the debt
means
already
that
fall
you,
off.
It could
Some
be the end of
people
the
already
world.
experienced
That could be
it.
the end of having that money available to use.
well, there's nothing horrible about the tax bill going down for 6 months at a time or a year at a time. It's not.
So you're going to
it's not
stand up
horrible.
and say you're going to increase it to pay
Sure.
for a
Yeah,
DPW?
absolutely, yep.
Really?
Yeah, sure I will. Yeah. Show me the savings first, though.
Is this thing on?
Show me the savings first. After the savings, I'm not increasing it after if you're level spending and then you want to increase it. But you want to
Sure.
show the taxpayer the savings,
Right.
then you want to go
And
forward?
say that tax break we
Absolutely.
gave you for a year, we're going to increase this year.
Absolutely, I'll be
All
glad
right.
to.
Steve,
Be
I
glad
love
to.
that.
Buck me right up for that
Look
one.
at that. I'm
Yeah.
pleasantly surprised.
Don't be afraid for taxes to fall. They should rise and fall.
There we
This
go.
is time for them to fall. It's time for them to fall.
Question?
Yeah, Lynn Haggerty, Side of the Lane. Can you base your budgets on square footage? That might help. If you base your budgets on square footage, if you need this amount of footage for your, for the library, for your senior center, if you do that, there's criteria for that. That might help. Just saying.
Thank you.
And I'm in favor of keeping Article 16 if we cut it by half. You know, that gives them a little bit of money that they have left over.
You want to cut it, so you want to change it
not,
to
keep it for
12,500?
Or plus that'll give them that 5,000, right? They had, that should be enough to go, right?
It certainly is some money to get going, yeah.
And then the townspeople can decide on the floor. They can shut it down if they don't want to spend it.
Just real quick,
Yes, Mr. Wright?
you know, if you're talking about something to do with school, you should ask the school teachers. With this DPW, does Dennis want this second study, or does he pretty much know what he needs, and he's got a general idea what it's gonna cost?
I'm pretty sure Dennis would like a second study because he knows he ain't gonna get $12 million.
Well, no, that should not be the way to go with that.
Well, I mean, the $12 million, the $12 million plan is the optimal plan. It's the plan that addresses every one of the needs, has a little bit of growth for the future, not a lot of growth for the future, but as the chairman pointed out, we're all realists in this effort, and if we can't get the optimal approach, then we would rather a phased-in approach where, to Selectman Simon's point, if the community center comes in $5 million, maybe we could check off phase 1 of the DPW project with the remaining $2 million.
Right, and oftentimes it's a situation where if you want X, Y, and Z, you ask for X, Y, and Z and plus, in hopes you'll get X, Y, and Z. So realistically, I'm sure Dennis knows that this 11 million, maybe he's not going to get all of it, but maybe he has an idea what he really, really needs and he probably has an idea what other towns have done it for. I mean, do we ask other towns, what does your garage cost for your vehicles?
We've done
There's
that.
not enough, to me, in town with a lot of things, there's not enough searching for the cheaper way to do things. For instance, forgive me for doing this.
Mr. Rice, I just want to just
Yeah.
let you know that this proposal is the cheapest way, and I'm going to tell you why, because it's not a brand-new build. It's actually a renovation. So I forget who it was, Lynn maybe had mentioned to use square footage as an indicator.
Yeah.
And so the square footage is actually less in this $12 million proposal because it's a renovation. So it allowed us to go for a cheap alternative. So
I understand
but
that.
we're more than happy to share all those slides with you too, so you can see those.
And with that 11 million
If you wanna-
figure
you wanna
that
shoot it at
came in
12.5, go ahead.
the first study,
Yes.
I'm sure it
10,000
came to the
plus
consultant and said,
5,000,
this is what, if you want, this is gonna
Okay.
cost.
No,
Does
instead
he
of 12,000.
enumerate really detail what things are
I
gonna
don't know how
cost?
much they'll get done for that, but hey.
Okay, right down to, and you don't think that you can find people, qualified builders, contractors, whatever, that can say, I'll do it for you for less and I'll do it exactly that way.
Well, we'd have to develop bid specs, we'd have to have a design for that, and that all costs money. So for
So
example,
that study
so for example, if to your point, to your exact question, if we wanted to do your approach, we'd have to pick a piece of that. So we'll say the wash bay, right? And then we'd be asking for design money for a $2 million wash bay, which would be 10% of that. So instead of $25,000, we would be asking for $200,000 for schematic design money of a wash bay.
Why do you even need the design? Why can't the builder or the person doing the work say to you, this is how I'll make it, and if you like it?
Because that's a requirement by procurement law. We
I
would
see.
have to do a design and then go out to bid.
So not only are we going to spend this money, then we're going to spend design money, so it just keeps multiplying.
Well, you're right, you have to design what you're looking for at some
So,
point.
I think we all know where it goes down. I mean, it's like, that's why we have an electric. I mean,
This is a
right, we know-
$25 million corporation.
right, we spend $25 million a year. We're talking about spending $25,000 on a $12 million investment. I don't think it's a big deal to let the voters decide. If they don't want to support it, then we've got our answer. But for the three of us to decide seems short-sighted. But that's, I'm done talking about this.
I'm in favor we cut it to 10, 12, 5. Okay.
I would go along with 12.5.
Derek?
Unless you want to defer it till May. I'm all in favor of May. If you want to just leave the article and pass over till May, does that make more sense?
I think we kind of have to keep the ball moving. If we run in that 18-month window, I would agree with you 100%.
Do you want to go 10,000 or 12.5? Which number do you want?
Well, if we do the 10,000 plus the 5,000, I give them 15.
Yeah, again, like I said earlier, the only thing I don't know if there's any outstanding invoices. So that 5,000 may be left or less. Could be 2 or 3.
Let's give them the 12.5. That cuts it in half.
Okay. I'll go along with that.
We're on
So-
Article 17.
Yep, moving on to Article 17. This is for 7,500 to complete a compensation administration plan. Can you tell us about this one, there?
Sure. So it's in the bylaw that the personnel board conducts in every 5 years a classification compensation study. The last one was conducted in 2014, I believe. So the 5-year mark is up, and the personnel board has requested $7,500 to conduct this 5-year study.
Who does the study?
We have to hire a consultant to do the study.
And then we guess that's the going rate.
Well, I'll say this, I did the study in Plymouth and it cost us $42,000.
How much?
$42,000 to do the study in Plymouth.
And we're required by law to do the study every 5 years.
We're not required by law, but in the personnel bylaw,
Best practice,
it says 5 years.
best practice.
Okay, So we don't have to do it.
It's not required by statute, I should say.
That was my question.
You're gonna ask.
We did the compensation study in 2014, and this is to complement that study to move forward.
Hmm.
Okay.
Want to defer till May, gentlemen? Spending an awful lot of money on this warrant. You're going to set your tax rate in a few weeks.
I'd rather use this money for a plan for the DPW.
Postpone it.
Want to postpone till May?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Article 18 is for an IT upgrade for $40,000. Have you guys talked to the IT committee at all, offline?
I have not. Derek briefed me earlier on this article.
Right.
I believe someone is here that can speak to that.
Yeah, Marcia?
The technology committee found that the current vendor, their contract had actually run out, and we were still using them. So after working with them for a while, we realized that we really should put together an RFP and go out to bid, and that's what we did. We had 8 proposals submitted, and we screened the proposals, came up with the 4 top vendors, and we brought them in to do presentations. And we did this purely on technicals, on the technology, not on price. So we selected the 2 highly advantageous vendors, and we submitted those to Derek. Derek took a look at them, and we decided on one retrofit. And
I'm sorry, what was the name of it?
retrofit.
Retrofit.
The vendor we have now is very reactive. So if something breaks and people here understand something is broken and fiddle around with it, they will call and they'll come and fix it. But as far as helping with training, policies and procedures, being proactive, we're finding more and more things that there are holes. So we need someone like Retrofit who's proactive, particularly in the area of cybersecurity. We found that a lot of, in the area of cybersecurity, the bad guys are becoming more and more
Creative?
creative is a good word for it, in coming up with ways of, beating the software that's out there for like antivirus software and so forth. So Retrofit, for instance, has a network control center in Milford, and they can monitor our systems and help to tell us that things are gonna be a problem, and they can detect them before they're actually a problem. And we see that as a great advantage. For instance, right now, we could run out of disk space on a system, and we'll find out when the system falls over. They can at least give us this information in advance. There's certain attacks that they can detect and prevent from a cybersecurity standpoint. The first thing they do when they come in is an assessment of the environment and try to help us out figuring out what needs to be done. So we really need someone that's proactive. They do training. Right now, it'd be great to have someone who could come in and train people on, okay, the guys are getting smarter on sending scam emails and setting up fake websites. You click on this and you've now downloaded a virus. They can at least tell them the latest and greatest things to look out for to try to prevent things like that. We did some research, and there were 23 attacks in the first quarter of 2018 within the United States to municipalities and government agencies. And a lot of the attacks now are ransomware. And originally ransomware, they'd ask for a couple $100. There are towns paying $10,000, and when you pay the money, you're not guaranteed that the key will actually work to unlock your data. And even if it does unlock your data, have they put some other virus on your system? So it doesn't leave you in a good state, and we don't want to be in that position.
Okay.
So this would increase the budget by 40,000. I think we already budgeted 18,000 for IT.
Yes.
So it'll be a total of 58,000, if I'm not mistaken.
And there's a typo there in it's 45 in the text and 40 in numeric.
So is this 40,000 for one-time investment or per ongoing?
It's part of our annual contract.
It sounds like this is something that we need to do with, people paying for stuff online, your credit card information, your personal information.
Right, this would probably affect personnel files, things of that nature as well?
Any data.
Any data that's stored on our computers.
But this doesn't include any software in terms of like new financial accounting software, budgeting software, that's all separate.
So this is strictly security.
Well, and infrastructure support, hardware support, purchasing, all the things of that nature.
So does the $40,000 include new servers, new computers, laptops? So this is just...
No, but if we have a hardware
Is
problem,
it
they'll
just
come
tech
in and
support?
repair it. Yeah, it's tech support, and they'll maintain our systems.
Is that a good price? You're the IT guy,
I don't know if I'm an IT guy, but that's a lot of money to pay somebody for supporting it. But
Can we say what the second bid was?
Yeah, the second price came in at 120,000.
I mean...
Was that apples for apples?
What was the lowest proposal? Was this it?
Very close.
Very close.
The lowest proposal was ranked, our current vendor ranked the lowest of all four vendors.
Right, and that's the 28,000. Got it. So this would, so it wouldn't be 58, or would it be $58,000 total?
Total for the year.
Yeah.
Okay, so
The
because the 28's already in there, so this is 40 on top of the existing 28.
No, 40 on top of 18.
On top of 18.
18, yeah. So it would be 58, so each year, that's what we'll spend, and do you think that that number then would be moving forward? Would that number be a relatively flat number?
As far as the financials, we weren't allowed to talk about that during the presentations. We did it specifically on the technical abilities of the company. Derek wanted to go with a 3.5-year contract, happier to fill up to finish the fiscal year, and then 3 years forward. So hopefully we can lock in a price that would hold up.
So is there a possibility this will go from this 58,000 to 120 next year?
I don't, their proposal was for $58,000
For 3 years?
per year, yeah.
Oh,
right. Was there anybody on the committee with technology background or experience in terms of hardware support, software support, technology support,
Yes.
IT expertise?
Everyone on the committee had IT background.
So I would defer to the experts.
Hmm.
Any questions on that? Or?
We thought you'd have a, is that a, I mean, you don't know if that's a good price or not?
I'm not going to second guess the work that the committee did.
Okay.
That's why we have committees.
All right,
If you want me
Article
to do it,
20.
appoint me to the committee and I'll do it.
I don't know anything other than pushing the on button, so.
Exactly.
Okay, Article 19 is for $2,500 to buy Microsoft Access. Is that the going price for a municipality for that program?
That is for 10 users.
10 users?
So we made a commitment that we were going to move away from an Excel spreadsheet to build a $25 million budget and move to something more 21st century. We have a budget module we currently pay for through our current financial software system called Vadar. The platform in which the budgeting is built is through Microsoft Access. So we don't have, 10 users don't have Access installed on their computers. So we need to purchase the licenses so that they can build their budgets for FY20 through the budget module system.
Do we have to pay anybody to set up the Access database, or does Vadar come in and they do all that automatically?
It's already set up through Veda. It's already set up, yep.
So this is just for the license?
This is just for the Microsoft Access license, yep.
So if we pay this,
Okay.
we'll have the use of the non-Excel version of a budgeting application.
That's right, yep.
And those will be the last 10 users that we need to get everybody on board?
Yep.
Okay.
Everybody, all department heads will be on board, have access to build their budgets through Veda.
All day long.
Okay, I missed this discussion earlier, but this is for $5,000. Moving along, sorry about this, to Article 20. This is to raise and appropriate $5,000 for electronic voting. I missed that discussion earlier, so.
It was a well-vetted process, a lot of opinions flying around. I felt like this is the feedback from the people. I thought the article should just move forward and let the people decide. Maybe there is not a lot of support. We don't know. Maybe there's not a lot of support. I'm hearing that there is, but maybe there's
I'm hearing
not.
that there is too.
Between this and the comp analysis, we could pay for the DPW engineering study.
So, does that mean we'll never do electronic voting?
But
It's just going to be a 6-month delay.
Yeah, might as
Got all
well
the
forget.
time in the world. Why
Yeah,
rush?
but if it loses,
And you
it'll
have-
be a forever delay.
So I just had a curiosity, did you guys decide to do a committee?
I
Or are
was-
we gonna do a committee if this passes? Then we'll
I was
form
thinking we'd do a
to implement
committee
it.
if it passes,
And
was
then
what I
you'll be
was
able to
thinking.
implement this by May.
Yeah, I'm in support of what the moderator's opinion was, which was that we defer this, create a committee, have them do the study and the analysis, not spend the $5,000 now and sort of bias the process toward doing electronic voting, and have people, have the committee make their recommendations, do their research, get the information, put something on in the spring that allows the voters to vote based on all of that information. And then if we're ready, we have electronic voting in the fall. I was a big proponent of this and an advocate for doing this, and I think I've talked to a lot of constituents and people that I know that have said they don't go to town meeting because they don't want to stand up in front of their neighbors and vote no against something that might be controversial. So I'm a big supporter of it, but I also think that the town moderator's been doing what he does for over 25 years and has a lot of experience and perspective that's valuable. And so waiting 6 months to vet this with his support is, to me, worth it. But that's just my vote.
I'll agree with you to withdraw it.
Okay. Saving money, Steve.
We're heading in the right direction.
We're going in the right direction.
Yeah.
So here's another computer program. This is to raise and appropriate $15,000 for Access Pro. And I guess this is for the Board of Assessors.
That's correct.
Bill or Kelly, would you?
And so we are running an old version of the software, which is due to be orphaned from support in the next year or so. This would allow us to port our existing data over to the new system. Frankly, probably absolutely will need to be done within the next year because, like I said, they're no longer supporting the old version. We did go out and get 3 quotes for this, and the entity we chose was by far the least of all of them. If I remember correctly, these are the people that are doing the existing work, which is probably why they came in where they did.
So, did you say the existing tool is supported for another year or two? You said orphaned in another year or two.
I believe that my recollection is it will be orphaned in the year.
In a year. So they support it now, they'll support it for the next year, but after that, we'll need to
It
replace
says
it.
as of January 1st, 2019, it will no longer be supported.
July 1.
So I'm a little bit off.
And part of the reason why we're looking forward to do it in the fall is as of January 1, when our values, when the values of all the properties need to be updated, as of July 1, we'll have the new software versus trying to do it mid-fiscal year or at the beginning of the fiscal year versus January 1. complicates the matters.
Have we had problems with the existing software? Is it working okay, or does it break down a lot? Or?
Yeah, it's working very well, which is why we want to continue with the same type of program, but we want to be able to have the support by our current vendor. And they will no longer support it in the next year.
When you say no longer support it, can't you still use the system for the next couple of years?
You can use it until it breaks.
And once it breaks, and then if we can't determine values for the town, we can't send out tax bills.
That would save the taxpayers some money.
That would save the taxpayers. There's one way to get the bill to go down, right?
It's an idea.
As with most software upgrades, the program is, based on what I saw, easier to use, more user-friendly, and probably at least from a reporting perspective, will allow for a lot more flexibility in analyzing what we have.
Is this for a certain number of licenses, or is this just one license and that's how much the license costs? How many users can use the software?
Certainly enough for our needs. I'm not sure of the number.
I believe the software is put on our server.
Yes.
So any computer that has access to our server would have access to the program itself.
Now, is this 15,000 for the upgrade or a whole different program?
For the upgrade.
Wow.
For the upgrade and moving the data.
And moving the data.
Is there a way to budget this where you upgrade like every couple years, where you don't have this big 15,000, where like you can buy a part $2,000 every year or something?
No, because, and like he stated, we have to move the data over to the new software, so you can't do that in phases, because then you have values on different programs.
Mr. Fowler, did you have something to say?
I think this is very strategic also because it's got to work during that period of time while you're out of it. Right?
That period of time is January 1st, you said?
January 1st, correct.
So it's either now or never. All right.
Next January?
That would be fine with me.
A lot of money on the budget, gentlemen.
Up to you guys.
I mean, I'm fine putting this out here because I'm confident that the software will work, and if it doesn't work, I'm confident we can pay the vendor to fix it.
That's what I'm thinking. I would think we could get more time out of it.
They might not support it, but it's not fair to say, all right, you guys aren't going to be able to send out tax bills this year, right?
Right.
But like realistically speaking, if the software goes down sometime between July 1st and January 1st, that's what we're talking about of 2019. If something goes wrong, I've got to believe we can call the vendor and say, hey, we know this is an unsupported product, but it just crashed. We need you to send someone out here, even if we have to pay a consulting fee to do it. We can get it back up and running.
They may not have the talent to do that.
They'll have the talent.
You're talking about a very limited staff. Right?
I wouldn't make that recommendation to put it on, which is why we're asking for it now.
No, right, but do you think that we could call, I mean, I know I've worked with software vendors in the past so on software that's no longer supported, but if you're in a pinch, they're going to help you. That's just been my experience, but I don't know the vendor you work with, you do.
The last time, I'm a little bit out of date, the last time we had a vendor support of one. If he's busy doing something else, too bad. It's not their first priority, they're going to support their new software, not their old software.
Is there any way to tie this into the budgeting software? The other finance software that we're buying? Or is this standalone because it's for...
This is just for assessors, right?
So,
Separate.
so it's
from the-
built specifically for assessors?
It stores all of the valuation data and formulas, and is what we use to basically value all of the properties in Upton at the same time.
In other words, let's just say hypothetically FY18, you would have that always on backup. So in other words, worst case scenario, you always have your formulas. You wouldn't lose your formulas. You just wouldn't be able to move them forward.
We wouldn't be able, yeah, if it failed for some reason, we would still have the underlying data, presumably, and we could use that may be some gap as we try to figure out how to do that. And, you know.
I think we should just leave it personally.
I vote to leave it on the warrant.
Okay, so, okay, we'll move on to Article 22. This is for $16,000 for 2 new voting machines.
Hey.
So, as I indicated in the explanation, the current voting machines that we have were purchased in 2003, and they were probably, and so that makes them 15 years old, and they were probably 10 to 15 years old when we purchased them. Over the last 4 or 5 years, the state has gone out and approved new voting machines. There's 2 machines, 2 different machines, very similar, but 2 different machines that have been approved by the state. And this is the quote for me to replace the 15 to 20-year-old machines that we currently have that calculate the
Are the
voting.
machines broken that we're using now in any way?
No, but similar to the software, they don't make parts for those machines anymore, and the memory cards are from 20 years ago, so if anything happens, I could run into some issues for voting. Part of the reason why I'm asking for it at the special town meeting is I can purchase them and use them for the annual town meeting next May, annual town election next May, as well as the presidential primary and the state primary before they need to be used for the 2020 presidential. So that will give us the opportunity, the voters and the election workers, to become familiar with the machine, so we don't have any snags in the next presidential election.
Is it that hard to use this new voting machine?
I'm sorry?
Is it really that hard to use this new voting machine that you need that many elections?
I'd rather have some experience with it and not use it for the first time at a major election when we're going to have 80 to 90% of them. I'd rather use it the first time when we have a 20% turnout or a 30% turnout than an 80 to 90% turnout at the 2020 election.
Now, this is just the machine that gathers the ballot when you put it in the ballot box, right?
It scans the ballots and gives us the unofficial results on the tape.
Are these new machines?
Yes,
So this is a once every 20-year investment of $16,000?
exactly. The last time I asked for money was in 2003.
Okay, I'm good.
If it's not broke, don't buy it.
I'm a May guy. I say kick it to May myself, but you guys like spending money.
I just agreed with you.
We like being responsible.
I'm willing to kick it to May.
Yeah, okay, pass over.
Derek, would you talk about this? Because this is $10,000 for general bylaws.
Sure. So, as you know, all the work that we do is based upon statutes, bylaws, zoning bylaws, regulations, and this is a very important process we go through with codification of all those. For example, it's really important to know what statutes we accepted in 1920s, because that gives us the basis for the things that we do today. And I think Upton is very similar to a lot of other communities that have just filed that stuff away over a century, and struggles with understanding what statutes they accepted. Sometimes we do this stuff over and over because we don't realize the votes that were taken back in 1950 or 1940. So the codification process goes back in history, reviews all the statutes that were accepted, pulls them in a code, and then runs a cross-section of how they connect to the bylaws that we've created from the statutes that were accepted. And so this would be conducted by a vendor who come in for a lengthy period of time, and then build this program so that we can easily have access to all those laws, all those statutes, and that would be online. It would be for the public to go and to view these statutes and so on, so that they can understand, how government is structured and what gives us the basis to do the things, or the authority to do the things that we do on a regular basis. So I had the experience to have been a part of a community that had this, and it was extremely helpful when, especially going to town meeting, when we would seek additional support for various statutes.
I'm a no.
Passed Tomei?
I don't understand.
Did you
it
say
at all,
what?
so-
Yeah, I'm a no.
There we go.
Don't think we should have it on the warrant.
Okay.
Sayonara. You're a no too, Steve? Table it? or-
Yes. Yep. We'll pass over till May,
I don't understand.
revisit in May.
So Article 24, I think has a couple changes to the Town Managers Act that we just had a couple changes to. Let's see. Basically, it's just, you want to talk about, basically one was for disciplinary action. You want to talk about that one?
Yeah,
Joe?
so there's two changes here to the Town Managers Act. One, it states that in order for the town manager to take any disciplinary action or termination, the town manager must notify the Board of Selectmen 15 days in advance of such action. So the proposal here is to change that, which would allow the town manager to take immediate action for discipline or termination, and then notify the board thereafter, in which the board would have 15 days to hear the case and then overturn the case if they deemed it appropriate.
What is the use case that you provided that would explain why this is important? Or the scenario within
Yeah,
which this
so,
becomes important?
for example, if there was an individual who was, say, drinking on the job, what I would do is I would suspend that person immediately for drinking on the job. Under the current special act, I would have to give notice to the Board of Selectmen. They would then have 15 days to hear that case before I could take action. So in theory, we would have to allow this person to continue to work after we have found that this person was drinking on the job.
And at the end of the day, it's still ultimately under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen to make any final decisions associated with disciplinary action or termination.
Right, so the Board of Selectmen would be able to hear an appeal of that individual, that employee, and then the board could overturn the decision of the town manager.
So basically you're flip-flopping.
Right.
You could do it, then we would overrule you before you did anything.
Right. You would, yeah, the way it works right now is you have tied the hands of the town manager, not you, but the act has tied the hands of the town manager to take any immediate action for discipline or termination.
In the personnel board, I think it identified this 6 months ago or so.
Right, so the personnel board had identified this. This issue here actually came up a year ago. It was one of the issues that the town managers review committee had entertained as a challenge. Both the previous town manager and the interim town manager had stated that this was a challenge with managing employees.
Was this recommended by them? I don't remember.
By the committee?
Yeah.
Recommendations.
Okay. I'm good to put it forward.
Yep. And then the other one was allowing the board to enter in a longer contract length. That was the
Right,
other.
so right now, the board can only entertain a 3-year contract, so the proposed change would allow the board to consider up to a 5-year contract if they deem it was appropriate. I mean, they don't have to do 3 years today. They could do a 1 or 2-year contract if they chose to. This just gives them, the board, more latitude in a 5-year contract if they thought it was appropriate.
Any questions with this, Rich?
Nope, I'm good.
Any questions, Steve?
Nope, I don't.
Ooh. Article 25. This is for $50,000 to raise and appropriate for a conceptual design of a municipal community center consisting of a public library, a senior center, and possibly other municipal services.
So I would just like to point out for folks, this is an area where over the past year or so, there's been some concerns about transparency and what's going on, and we don't know what's happening, and there was meetings and designs and all these things. So I want to be very clear that what this money is to put together a proposal and a drawing of what a redesign of the downtown area could look like. So it would be, you know, whether you call it a 5, a 10, a 15-year plan, but part of this money is spent to do a visualization of what the entire downtown area could look like in 10 or 15 years. So including a new town common, a community center, some mixed-use development space, a renovated library space, looking at the property next to it, looking at some of the land across the street from the current library, redoing the road and the rotary, potentially putting in a rotary at this intersection here. So there's a lot, the scope of this drawing, for lack of a better word, this design drawing is very broad, and I want people to recognize that. There's no sort of preconceived notion of what we do specifically in the short run, right? Part of this is also, the specific part of this is a community center, and this is from the Finance Committee meeting as well, so we had the meeting there. But the big part of this is the community center, which would combine the library, the Council on Aging, as well as some community meeting space into one building that would be put in the downtown area as part of a downtown revitalization project. So this is an area of opportunity where we've got money coming off, the debt coming off of the books. This is an area where we could spend money. This was an area identified, revitalizing the downtown was identified as a priority, both in the 2005 master plan, but also more recently at the Finance Committee meetings and conversations we've had and with the town manager. So, you know, this is the beginning of that public dialogue. Nobody's making any significant investments right now. $50,000 is certainly a significant investment, but this is to get the discussion going with the community as well. And I do think we have the Library Council on Aging Feasibility Committee meeting right now to look at alternatives, to look at utilization, to look at space needs. So that work and that committee's feedback will be an input into this consulting and design effort.
Have we given, I don't recall, have we given the library feasibility any money yet?
Not to my
I don't
knowledge.
think we have, no.
No.
But this really is, the way this article is written, it's focused just on the library and feasibility. It's not the whole downtown revitalization.
We should reword it then, in my opinion, because we definitely talked about that at the last
Oh, see, that's what I'm saying.
combined meeting.
I don't, to me, that looks like it's just on that building, and again, without setting a budget, without having, you know, any expectations, I think it's premature, unless, as you said, I think we need to, before we put this article forward, I think we need to figure out what are we actually getting for that $50,000.
Yeah, I think what we had talked about getting was that drawing of the entire downtown area. I could tell you all the parcels it includes. It's going up where the park is and where that open space is, where those ball fields are. Also down around the corner, around Grove Street, where the church is. People are always asking what we're going to do with this church. So this would include what we would do with that tract of land, as well as what we would do with the land where the library is. Because if we redevelop, if we build a community center that has a library and a council on aging in it, that frees up the library building, the Racine building. And there's talk that that may or may not be worth renovating, and it sounds like not. From a structural perspective, it would cost us several $1 million to renovate that building or to re-engineer it so that it's structurally sound and ADA compliant and all these other things. So we had talked about putting together a design that the community could really rally around and understand what the long-term vision is. And it's not something clearly that we would do in the short run, right? This is a 5, 10, 15-year proposal. But as we look out 5, 10, and 15 years in terms of what our budget is and when we have debt rolling off, we can put together a plan over the next 5, 10, 15 years that here's what our budget is. To your point about wanting a budget, right? Like this is how we do long-term capital planning, is you put together a long-term vision about what it is you want to do, what you want the downtown to look like. You don't have to do it all at once. You can phase it out and say, phase 1 is going to be the community center, or phase 1 is going to be the mixed-use development where the church is and that abutting property, or phase 1 is going to be something else. You can discuss that. But you have to have the visualization of the entire project so that people in the community can understand what we're spending money on and what these alternatives are. We may look at it and say, you know what, we want to put this money towards a DPW. We may want to put this money towards commercial infrastructure development. But we've got to have these proposals and plans on the table so that we can engage the town in a conversation about what they want to invest their money in.
Is it too late to change this, to include everything that Brett talked about?
No, again, it's that we can edit this. I've been listening, I've taken some notes, and we can certainly edit the language to incorporate the downtown.
Because with the next two articles,
vision as
with
well.
the next two articles coming up,
Right.
I think it's important for this article to expand, so people will probably vote for 26 and 27.
Right. This is to set the context
Yeah.
for 26 and
If we
27.
don't have buy-in in 25, we'll never get 26 and 27.
Yep.
Mrs. Wright?
Thank you. Mary Price, Federal Lane. I understand what you're talking about as far as the town center and everything, and the design to include these things. But what I'm wanting to know is if that's $50,000, do we have any kind of an idea of a cost for doing not just the center of the town of Upton, but a master plan on the whole town of Upton, so that we can see if there's some way we can use some of the open space and bring in industry and bring some money, and then we can do all these other things. It seems like we keep like this, trying to do all of these things with no money, and then all of a sudden you get your tax bill, and meanwhile, there might be other ways to get to these things by just going around it a little bit and going for the main source of income first. You know, one of the things that I thought was, oh, maybe the railroad, when I look at it and I see it started off on railroad tracks, and then we got the silos, and then we got the pellets stacked up there, and now we've got the whole thing wiped out. And I don't know, do we get any money from the railroad company for taxes? We could have had, and this is Barbara Daniels is discussing it, Henderson's plan, etc. We could have, if we looked into how do we bring money here before we spend money, other than the taxpayers. Because look at Hopkinton. Go up to the center there with that whole condo complexes, all the restaurants up there, the banks, they moved across the street, they renovated this. They didn't do away with the old Golden School, they renovated it to a Starbucks. But all I'm saying is, in my mind, maybe it's my age, I don't know, but in my mind, I keep thinking how happy all the townspeople would be if all of a sudden we announced, we have a plan that's been done professionally as a master plan about every square inch of the town, and we now know that these sites, we might have to change bylaws or zoning or whatever. We're going to open that up, not to small business, like for Walker Street or whatever that place is called up there, but to things like a Walmart, things like CVS, big things that will pay big money for the land to be able to put something, because Upton has nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, Whitensville, little Whitensville, had a Walmart. And what did they do? They closed it, and who came in? Ocean State Hotwire. There's people in there all the time. Next door, the Dollar Tree. You wait in line in the Dollar Tree.
A lot of times to attract, and I'm sorry for interrupting you, but a lot of times to attract those businesses, towns need to cut tax deals and give them tax breaks. So, for example, in Northbridge, Walmart wasn't. In fact, you'd think they'd be the highest taxpayer in Northbridge, and they're not. The people that own the land are the highest taxpayers because a lot of these big businesses negotiate tax breaks with the local communities to attract them. That said, the last master plan that was done in Upton was in 2005. Upton is clearly a majority bedroom town. That's what the majority of people in this town want. People in this, my understanding is people in this town don't want Walmarts. They don't want large strip malls. They don't want large developments. I know you might. I'm not disagreeing with what you want. I'm saying that the most of the people that I hear want this to maintain its status as a bedroom community and be an old New England town, which is part of why putting together a plan for an old New England town common, a traditional sort of New England town common, is something that's worth doing as part of that long-term plan. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't do a master plan as well. I think that's a great idea. we should do a master plan for the entire town. I agree with you. Let's do that. We can work with the planning board would really drive that. So I'd say let's work with the planning board to get them to do a whole new revised master plan, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do long-term planning for the future.
The small village idea is lovely, if you've got money. But we need money, we need money, we need money. And that Walmart left from the Ocean State job site, they're out almost to 146.
It's still in Whitensville.
It's still in Northbridge, but it's not offensive. It's up on a hill. I mean, you wouldn't even know it was there. The houses around it, do not complain about it.
That's great.
I mean, we need to use our head and find where some of the land is that we have that's out in the boondocks of the woods. It's sitting. Maybe a few people walking with their dog, but not many. Let's go to the smart side of this, and instead of thinking of all these things that we'd love to have, first, let's bring in money. And the only way I can see to do it is the taxpayers are strapped. I mean, maybe there are some new people in town that have wonderful jobs, that have built beautiful new homes, God love them, but not too long ago, in the economy in 2008.
So I just want to get back on topic, Mrs. Wright, so.
Okay, I'm
Because
sorry,
this
I
is.
need to go on, but what I'm saying is
Yeah.
I can't emphasize enough that
Well, let
we
me-
have to be thinking
So we can
about
only,
getting money.
I mean, we could put together something to do a master plan.
Right. Well, the thing of it is too, to your point, really, and you're right in some ways, this is all tax driven. These expenses are all on the back of the taxpayer. So pictures are great, designs are great.
Not necessarily. What,
look
you mean the plan is, or the actual project?
50,000.
Right, the plan
But
is.
that
plan
also
is-
get you to sell them buildings. This will get you the drawings, so you can.
I mean, sometimes you have to spend money to make money, right?
Right,
If you want to
but
attract
you gotta
businesses to
remember-
town, sometimes you need to do this partnership and do these projects.
This
And
is
if
true.
you want that, commercial,
we're talking
retail,
about
and
in
this
this
and that, how else are you going to do it if you don't do this?
This particular warrant article, it's a lot of money to spend. And then on top of that, again, this is triggering the expense of the Council of Aging and the library. So, which again, we don't have a budget for that
Well,
yet.
the
We understand
alternative,
that.
Steve, is to do nothing, right? So if we do nothing, we don't have to spend any money, we can all pack up and go home. But if you want to develop the town, if you want to make the community better, if you want to move the town forward, you've got to do something. And to do something, you have to do designs.
Not be an ADA compliant. What are we going to do
And
then?
if we have to, you would have to spend the money to make to fix the ramp, make the bathrooms handicapped accessible, and
Then
spend
you
that
just waste the-
$350,000.
Waste the money.
You still own the building.
So you want to spend $350,000 to make the library
No,
accessible?
he said, what would you do if?
It's only a matter
We're
of time.
working
Well,
on a
but-
feasibility
but-
committee, right?
right.
Are we working on a feasibility committee?
Yep.
Do
Well,
we
we're
have
not
one in
working on it.
place?
We have one,
Okay,
yeah.
we have one, correct. All right, so that's what we're working towards, right? That's the plan.
What's the plan? We have a committee that's looking at
Right.
putting together a library and a council on aging needs proposal.
Right.
Yeah. So what?
That was what we were just talking about, correct?
We're talking about spending $50,000 to put together a plan for the downtown
Is this a plan or
revitalization.
just drawings? Is what,
There's two components of it. One is a drawing, which is just a artist rendering of what the downtown could look like with squares on it that says, here could be phase 1, here could be phase 2, here could be phase 3. Short money. We don't need $50,000 to do that. That's just part of it, right? So part of it is we get that plan. Another part of it is more detailed drawings, right? And more, I don't know what you call them, engineered drawings on a floor plan, a layout, a design for a community center that includes a council on aging, a library, as well as community space, right? So I don't know what that would be, right? So it's going to be a multi-story building on some designated, the square footage to be determined by the committee that we've appointed to look at it. And so you were spending $50,000 to get one thing, which is a drawing of the revitalized downtown, an idea, a vision of what we could do over the next 20 years, and then a detailed, specific design and description of what would be potentially phase 1 of that project, which is a library, council on aging, and community space. And we would use the money from the debt that's rolling off in 18 months to fund that project as one of the community priorities. So the point is, at some point, you said it yourself, we've got that money to spend if we want to spend it and not increase the taxes.
I understand it, but
So if
there's-
we
let me
want to
just
spend
stop
that,
you for just a
if
second.
we want to spend that
You gotta
money,
remember,
if
if
we
you
want to
spend
spend, no,
everything
Steve,
on this budget-
let me finish. If we want to spend that money,
Your free cash
Then-
will be very close to zero, just so you know. Just be aware of that. If you move 200,000 over to stabilization, all these warrant articles pass, where will your free cash be?
I'm just making the point.
Just be aware.
I'm just making the point that when you spend, we have $7 million, $6 to $7 million that we need to spend, that we want to spend to invest back in the community because we've got it available without increasing the tax bill. Okay?
Right. Yep.
So we've got that money to spend.
Yep.
So what we're talking about is spending $50,000 and $25,000 to give us a plan for how we're going to spend $6 or $7 million. I think that's money well spent. The alternative is to not do any planning, not do any designs, not have a plan, and then what are we going to do? We're going to say, hey, we've got $6 or $7 million. What do you want to do with it?
You got to remember, you're buying drawings. You're not buying the
That's
architectural
exactly what
stuff.
we're buying.
That's all you're buying is drawings.
That's exactly
You're not
what we're buying.
the
It's called a
architectural
plan.
side.
So that, we have with we have the
What if? How are we going to spend $7 million if we don't have a
the
drawing
Economic
or we don't have a
Development
plan?
Committee and CMRPC.
How are we going to do it?
Did they give us any money towards what them guys are
The
discussing?
CMRPC grant is to develop an economic development plan for the town.
Would they provide us any of these renderings that we're looking for?
They can provide some street renderings, but they cannot provide the map that Selectman Simons talked about, that's talking about how all these pieces come together to revitalize the downtown area. And they certainly won't be able to provide any conceptual drawings or visual of what a community center would look like. They're not engineers. They're town planners.
So how did we come up with $50,000? Where did that number come from?
That was the number we got from architect, gave us that number?
Yeah, it's based on, for conceptual, it's a certain, based on what we think, it's a certain percentage based on what we think square footage of community center would be at.
So this, even what you bid out, does not have everything that Brett talked about.
Yeah, it does.
I think-
It does.
I
It
think
does.
Yes, it can definitely include that. We would have to specify that to the architect when we bid it out.
And just so we're clear, right now, what's being debated, and this includes a $50,000 community, that's $600,000.
Huh?
None, Selectman Lieutenant was talking about free cash, so the money that has been moved forward to this point represents about $600,000.
We cut out 26,000 already tonight, I think.
Right, so the
That
DPW
includes
design
that.
was 12.5, fire roof was 1,000, assessor software was 16, voting machines was, did you punt that, voting machines?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're minus 15, 400,000 for the police, community design center, 50,000, 2,500 for access.
100,000 for the fire roof.
Yeah, I said that.
Okay.
Yeah. So the total is 581,000.
Okay. And then there's 200,000 that's scheduled to move over to stabilization.
Well, that's a placeholder,
Okay.
so. we
What
just
I'm
gotta-
saying is that's, in my opinion, going to put us dangerously low at free cash. If free cash is right around $1 million, or was it 1.1?
We didn't get certified yet.
Okay.
What do we expect it to be, ballpark?
1.2.
Excuse me, I just have one more thing. Can we take some, you said, what are we gonna do with the $7 million? What are we gonna spend it on? Why don't we save it for emergencies and spend some of it on a master plan? Convert some of the open space land, and as soon as possible, get some industry in here. Then, look to Hopkinton, Ashland, Whitensville. They've got that whole strip mall with grocery
Yeah,
stores.
that's fine with me, but we don't want to
Thank
hear it
you.
when people are saying this buildings aren't ADA compliant and this and that, so.
What?
That's fine with us, but we don't want to hear people banging on our door saying you're not spending money to make buildings ADA compliant, you're not.
It's not fine with me. I don't think that's the right approach, so I disagree with you, Mary.
I don't understand why you're saying ADA compliant when you're talking about spending money on community centers, this, that, the other thing. That's not the
Can-
ADA compliant.
Well, the
So
current,
I would
the current
focus on
library,
Article 20. Let's
the
focus
current
on
library
Article
is
20.
not ADA compliant. So there's a problem with access with the current library.
So what you're saying is we can't just ignore that and let that go.
Yeah.
Right, so the options would be, nobody's really in favor of spending a lot of money investing into that building. I mean, if
What are
you,
we doing?
I say we debate this on the town meeting floor, so.
yeah,
I'm
we
in
really,
favor to
we
move
really
forward.
should put this probably forward.
Okay, I'm in favor of moving Article 25 forward. You? Okay.
Bring alive the idea of a master plan for the whole town.
We can do that for you.
Something to do to get industry in, to take the burden off the taxpayer.
We could
You know,
use some
and really,
volunteers,
the
we could use
master
some
plan
volunteers on a
doesn't
master planning
necessarily
committee.
show you, you know, how, I mean, it's a layout. A master plan, in a lot of ways, defines how you do business, but it doesn't always tell you how you should do business. And let's just take something as simple as solar array fields.
Well, let's,
When our master plan,
let's just get this warrant done.
okay, when the master plan was done,
Derek,
those
will you-
weren't even a consideration.
Yeah. Derek, will you
Okay.
do 26 and 27
Sorry,
for us?
got it.
These are both-
26 and 27, sure. So we need to go to town meeting to seek authorization to dispose of town-owned property. So 26 is requesting authorization for the Board of Selectmen to sell, lease, or transfer to Main Street, which is the public library. Article 27 is to sell, lease, or transfer 3 Milford Street, which is the old Holy Angels Church. Those are two parcels of land that we'd like to dispose of so that we could put them towards a bid for a mixed-use project downtown.
And there's currently nothing in the works, sir. It's just, this is being proactive. I mean, it's in the works, but this is.
No, I know, no,
It's
it's, we
being
gotta be
proactive.
transparent, right?
Like, this is for us to be proactive. If we do get a contractor or somebody to bid on something, we can sell the building or get rid of it. We don't have to wait till May.
The whole reason we want a plan is so that people know that we're being transparent and we can be transparent and show people what the plan is and what the idea is. So that's why we need the plan. And these two articles are part of that, right? So at some point you have to take action related to a plan, and that's what these two articles would relate to. It's not forcing us to do anything. It's not forcing us to make any commitments on any of the things we come up with in the plan. It's all part of the discussion.
We may not even do anything.
I would,
We may
I would
not
just
even
be-
do anything with
The
it.
only question I guess I would have, and it'd probably be for KP Law, is what actually are our options regarding the Steen Building? You know, I'm not sure if that somehow was gifted to the town or something of that nature. So just, again, if,
And
assuming
also
if
like
it-
the historical commission and all that, we need to make sure. that-
yeah, we may not be able to actually sell it.
Yep.
You know, maybe we would rent it or whatever,
Right.
or use it for other municipal use.
We should
But that would
certainly
be
see
one
if,
question
yeah.
that I would have.
We should
regarding
know if
that
there's
project.
any constraints, any deed restrictions or anything like that. Yeah.
That's it for the warrant.
Article 28?
Article 28 is $220,000 to be funded through the water enterprise and wastewater enterprise accounts. We talked a lot about infrastructure needs, and our DPW director is proposing to do a comprehensive evaluation of our infrastructure. So our wastewater plant, our water and sewer mains, and all the components attached to them, tanks, wells.
It seems like we're always doing something with that.
And he's going to use this, he has retained earnings for that? Okay. What is currently in that account?
I might have to check. I can find out that.
220 is a lot of money.
Any questions? Okay.
Yeah, I think Mr. Taylor has a question.
Bill Taylor again. This is another area where some of the recommendations that come out of this could be conceivably funded through green community grants.
There you go.
Yep, that's a good idea.
You think a portion of it or that whole amount?
It would depend, I mean, the green community grants will pay for energy conservation measures. I'm assuming that there's going to be a lot of stuff that comes out of this study that says you can improve the efficiency of your plant by doing this or buying that. And those things can be funded through green community grants.
And block grants.
Block grants?
Yes.
I think Mr. Simon said that.
Yeah, we have to.
We'll get to it.
You want me to?
That's all right. You have any questions on this, Steve?
Nope.
Okay.
So maybe I'm misunderstanding something. So this is a request to spend $220,000, and we just spent 20 minutes debating spending $50,000. Tell me what the difference is.
Where the
Just,
money comes from?
well, I just want you to explain to me why you.
I'm not going to.
Okay.
You don't get that answer tonight.
Okay.
All right?
Let's not get into
There
it.
you go.
Yeah, it's fine.
So, any new business, guys? I don't think so. No department reports, any correspondence? Does anybody in the public have anything? Marcia?
You've been talking about bringing businesses into Upton. Isn't the Economic Development Committee working on trying to do that?
The committee is working on they're working on multiple things right now. They're working on an economic development plan. So right now they're gathering data. At some point they're going to go out in the community and gather more qualitative data as to what folks think. They're also working on a village center bylaw so that as we get closer to putting out the church, at least minimally out to bid, that we have a bylaw that is centered around mixed-use development in the downtown area. And then lastly, when we get to that point where we have a developer in place, they'll be working directly with the developer on the use of that property and the, kind of the architecture and what its shape, what the vision of that property should be.
Anything for look ahead, Brett?
Nope, I'm good.
Anything for you?
Nothing.
The only thing I got is let's put on the development of a master plan committee. Make sure that's on our next agenda.
Development of a master plan committee. Okay.
Make sure that's on our next agenda. And then, somebody make a motion for executive session? Make a motion to go to executive session. Gary Gardy, aye.
Stephen Metellion,
Aye.
Any signatures, though?
you didn't do your public comment section.
Yeah, I did.
Did you?
Yeah.